channels were born, but really what, more importantly, they enabled between people and fans, creators and communities. So, who better to talk about it than with Dan? How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good to have you on. Your hair looks great today.
This is just post shower slick back. It hasn't dried
Wow.
yet.
Well, I'm bald, so I just admire people with hair firstly, but your hair is thick and luscious. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Who knew? We're here to make Dan blush. Anyways,
Glazed, yeah.
so I really wanted to get into just into Farcaster channels when they were launched. Firstly, was it June 7th or was it before?
I honestly couldn't tell you. I know it's 2 years ago, which feels like a lifetime ago. Yeah, I'm happy to give you the context of what our thinking was at the time, and then we can work our way through the evolution of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go. What
Yeah,
was the
so
thinking of
we
it when we got in?
were network was still permissioned, if I'm correct in my thinking there. I think that's right. Yeah. Um, and so we hadn't opened things up. It was still the era of like, you'd send me a DM on Twitter and I'd respond with sure best email. And so network probably something like 10 or 20,000 people, give or take. And I think one critique that people had about Farcaster, I mean, there were plenty of them, but at the time, I think one consistent one was it's an echo chamber. It's only people talking about Farcaster or Ethereum, and no one else is talking about any other topics. And so I think where we were hoping to achieve, and we started with two two channels. One was for Farcon, um, and then the other, or actually, there were like three in a short period. It was Purple, which was this kind of community organized DAO at the time on Farcaster, and then the second one was Farcon, which was the original one in Boston, organized by Grin and Cameron. And then the third was we did a game five or game, yeah, of the NBA Finals. And we were just trying to encourage people to talk about like a topic that wasn't necessarily whatever the monoculture was. Um, Granted, if you think about like Purple and Farcon are both kind of Farcaster oriented topics, but it was kind of like a natural extension of like, okay, there's a group of people who want to talk about a specific topic. Like, can we do that? And it ended up working out pretty well, to the point where in July we ended up launching a bunch more, and we started kind of top down, centralized. I was using like Midjourney to create like very simple icons, which if you look at some of them now, they're like comically bad. But that was the state of like um, the kind of image generation AI technology at the time. But like books, they all have a distinct thing where it's like they had like a solid color background, and then kind of whatever the icon. Some of the city ones have some like San Francisco and New York, and so we added a bunch over the course of July and August, and things were working pretty well with them. But I think the big thing that we weren't anticipating is while the network was still kind of invite only, there was basically no spam. So these things were kind of like anyone could participate in them. They were kind of this like idealized version of hashtags. You could go to a page and be like, oh, actually the LA or New York page has like good recommendations, or I kind of have a sense of what's going on for a relatively small community. Um, we opened the network up later in the fall, and I think quickly channels became overrun with there's a variety of different things going on. There's like outright spam, and there's some people who basically kind of like maybe a little enthusiastic about joining the network and are not kind of like taking the time to understand norms or whatever. And I think channels kind of like quickly needed some level of moderation, so we started to kind of like add that, and then we got into kind of this mode where we basically were like, okay, let's find channel leads, like people who can actually kind of like garden these communities. And I think that's where the primitive started to move from uh, what is more or less like a simplified or nice version of a hashtag to this kind of a community primitive, which I think we've since done two other big iterations. Um, but what's interesting about channels is, and I'll kind of wrap it up here, and we can go to the next question, is we've found a small group of people on the network that are extremely passionate about channels, and they've built like phenomenally interesting and unique and varied things using this, what I think is a pretty rudimentary organizational tool, and the tools have gotten a little more sophisticated over time, but for the most part it's pretty simple. And so it's just actually been pretty inspiring to see people kind of the creativity that they can bring to this. And I think one thing that's been challenging for us is we've never quite figured out how to make this a replicable playbook. It's like, how do we get more, you know, Humpties and Peachies and all the different people who have like kind of like built real communities with channels. Like, how do we build this into the product so that if you're relatively new to Farcaster, or you hear about it, you either are seamlessly kind of like figuring out what communities that get you interested, and then more importantly, I think for us, which we've never really figured out, is how do we get the next 100 or 1,000 channel creators? Because I really think running a community, creator is not even honestly the right term in my view. It's entrepreneur, right? Like running a community, and I have a sense for this because if you think about like Farcaster is itself like a big meta channel, like it requires a lot of work, and kind of you are this like quasi politician and entrepreneur, and so that is kind of the state of where we are. But I think like the humble origins were very much in a, hey, can we get people to talk about different topics on Farcaster? And at this point, I think there are something like 14,000 channels. I mean, most of them, just like Reddit, don't have a ton of activity, or they kind of are dormant. But there are a set, that top 1% or top 5% that do definitely have people participating. And yeah.
Uh, Rez, did you want to ask something? Go for it.
Well, I was just gonna say, Dan, I mean, to the extent we're trying to add a lot more texture to the platform through channels, you guys have definitely succeeded. Y- I think, it might get harder and harder or I don't want to say harder, but, for new ideas to spring up, but like general topics that everyone tends to be at least somewhat interested in. You have, politics, you have sports, that people regularly check in. I feel like those are, people naturally gravitate towards those. And as I would think too, like as a new user, when you come first land on Farcaster, it might be nice to know, oh, these are the main pockets that, if I'm interested in philosophy, or I'm interested in books, like those are the places I can land first and find my people first before I spread out. So I definitely think you guys have succeeded on this. So tell us a little bit more about how you see channels going from here. I know there's been some interest, there's been some community discussions about how you guys should implement moving forward.
Yeah, so very much active discussions. I actually created a group this week with a bunch of people who responded to a cast that I had. Um, I, I think what's been challenging for us with channels is if we start with the overall priority for what we as the kind of like core Farcaster team are trying to optimize for, we are trying to focus on new user growth and getting more people to sign up for Farcaster and then stick around. So it's kind of like a 1-2. It's like they need to hear about Farcaster, or it's actually 3 steps: hear about Farcaster and be excited enough to sign up, and then get to an experience in literally like the first minute after signing up that is going to be compelling enough that they may come back the next day and the next day and the next day, and that's how social networks grow, right? Like user retention is the thing to focus on. And I think what's challenging is, to date, we haven't been able to, and this is not for lack of trying, I've spent more time on channels than any other feature, figure out how to tie channels into that loop. So we've tried channels as part of kind of like the recommended feed for onboarding. We've tried invite your friend to Farcaster and then include a membership to the channel with it. So there've been a bunch of different iterations, and it's not to say that there's like one more iteration we could do that could suddenly make it work, but I think where it's been tricky is if we actually talk to new users, channels are just a very confusing concept, because it's like this app feels very much like Twitter. So people have a preconceived notion of what the app should be like. It's like, oh, I just post and great, like I get distribution or whatever. Um, but channels are this like Reddit thing, and now there's membership, and like each one is different, and some feel like topics, which like, okay, should I be able to post in food? Sure. But if you have a very specific community that's like, you need to buy the NFT here and this is the set of norms and rules that we have, the same primitive doing both is actually probably pretty confusing for people, because if they anchor towards their topics, then I should be able to post in anyone that I want. Or if they're communities, then it's actually, no, it's probably more proof of work based, because a good community isn't just necessarily open out of the gate to everyone. It's like you assimilate into the community a bit, right? And so I think that's been a bit tricky for us. But here's the thing, like there are, like I said before, a small group of extremely passionate Farcasters who've built communities on Farcaster. And so ripping that out of Farcaster and saying, sorry, the thing didn't work, that doesn't also feel good. And so we're a bit of a holding pattern. And I think one thing that's creating a bit of catalyst, which is exciting, is Sahil and the kind of like open rank Cura team are pretty serious about channels. Frankly, despite me saying, hey, I don't know if these things actually work, like in terms of a bet. And they're pretty insistent on that they believe they can. And so they're working on a proposal, and I'm giving them feedback on it, where I've been pretty clear. If we can come up with a way to simplify some of the mechanics around channels, we can actually push them entirely into the protocol. And I think there's a big misconception that channels are not decentralized. Channels from day one have been decentralized on a lot of core things that matter, like the content. Like anyone else can like interpret kind of at the protocol level. You could go build a client permissionlessly with channels, etc. The thing that we have yet to decentralize, and we've done iterations on, is what I'd call the metadata. It's like kind of like the config or the settings of like how the channel works, and then membership lists and some of that, and then channel creation. And so that's still important and stuff that we want to resolve. But that's actually what I would say is like that part. If we can actually get to a simplified version that can work pretty quickly into the protocol, then there's a version of the world where we can actually kind of what I would say is like unlock or release or stop holding back the development of channels, because that metadata right now is kind of very much like an opinionated thing that our app has. And then it allows, an open rank, Cura, some other mini app developer, net new client developer, they can kind of go wild with this. And I actually think the other one to call out is Zapper, is a wallet that's integrating the Farcaster protocol, similar to what Coinbase Wallet is doing. And they've taken the approach of, because again, channels themselves from the beginning have had this flexible on protocol primitive. It's called FIP2. They're using that for any token. So the idea is like you can just spin up a kind of community chat effectively, or like feed off of a CA, like a contract address for a token. So that actually needs to mesh with what we've had with channels and the primitive. And so I think I'm optimistic that there's a path forward here in the next kind of like couple months where we can actually do a concentrated sprint. I think people aren't going to get everything they want. So this is something that it started with this group, but I'm going to start kind of publicly soliciting is one tension is what people want is they want a bunch of new features for channels, completely reasonable. But then they want the features also implemented in the Farcaster app. So basically they want us to, whatever features get developed, they want us to put into the app and maintain the surface area. And I think the challenge of that is just we're a small team and we have a set of priorities that we're very focused on in terms of top line user growth. And so it's a bit of like want your cake and eat it too, where it's like, well, you want the innovation that's going to happen from other apps and clients, but then that is effectively getting added to our roadmap to implement. And that to us is not a good thing, in the sense that like what you want the core Farcaster team is like to have full freedom to like focus on whatever we think the set of priorities are. And if we can get it out of our app in the like kind of like messy situation it is now, while still having some what I would say simplified or basic functionality for channels in the main app, I think that probably is the best thing. But that's a bit of like people need to be willing to compromise a bit, right? Like they can't say, no, I want all the innovation to happen, but I do not want you to change anything that's in the existing app now.
There's something you mentioned that to me just kind of hit. I mean, there's a lot of things. I'm taking notes here and I'm like, which one do I pick? Because they're all so good. But this idea of like channel owners being entrepreneurs, I think in the new group chat that you started, someone said something that just totally like made me react in a really positive way, where they said a lot of these entrepreneurs, before they even start a mini app, right? Or anything that where they're trying to attract users that there's going to be a high cost of development, they usually start a channel. So it's really interesting what the flow looks like in terms of like getting attention on Farcaster, driving that attention to a curated conversation like you can have in channels, and then building with those users in mind, right? Like finding your core audience. I think channels actually works really well for that. Do you have any thoughts besides it just working that way in terms of like how you see entrepreneurs when whatever form channels exist in the future using that?
Yeah. So look, the biggest channel on the network is Base, right? And so Base was like early to the primitive, especially was as frames were coming out. I think they really doubled down on Farcaster. Coinbase is now integrating Farcaster into the Coinbase wallet. So I think that is like textbook of like, okay, this is a primitive that can work. Um, I think one challenging component, and it kind of always goes back to this a bit, of is as a channel scales to tens of thousands of users, and you have a lot of excited folks who want to participate, get part of the distribution of that channel, which we've changed how that works over time, and I think we could have done a better job being clear for people. But it creates a lot of moderation work, and I think this is it's just like a fundamental challenge of internet-based communities that the easiest way to think about this is order of magnitude. Managing a one-person community is easy. It's you. Like you just get to decide what you do. 10, okay, that's probably like you probably have a personal relationship with everyone. 100, you're probably starting to get to a place where you're going to need some norms that, yeah, you probably can still roughly know everyone in your community to a certain degree, but like you know, it's getting big. 1,000, you know, if you believe this like Dunbar number of 150, like you basically don't know everyone in a 1,000-person community, and then certainly by the time you hit 10,000 or 100,000, it's a different kind of beast. And anyone who's run a Discord server or group chat, or you know, like as a group increases, the complexity of managing and modding goes up actually at probably non-linearly in the sense that like you just have the number of connections between people and opportunities for people to get mad at each other or you know misbehave goes up pretty dramatically. And so I think that is something also to consider. And so for someone starting something new, this like cozy feel or kind of like building a community, it's great. Like you can probably ride that. I would say relative to a group chat, like you can get into the 100 to 1,000 a lot easier with a feed based community than you can with just like, hey, join my Telegram group or join my Discord or whatever. Um, but and so for new things like just getting to your first 100 or 1,000, like people who are even just vaguely interested, that's actually pretty great. But I do think that the challenge is as things scale, you just going back to this like nonlinear like amount of work required to manage, and I don't think we've cracked that. And there have been tools, and you know, Automod was an amazing thing by JT GI for a while, and then kind of we're changing the direction. And reasonably, he's like, hey, I don't know if I want to keep investing in this. He open sourced it. People are able to Howell, I think like forked it or whatever, which is great. But like part of this is like you actually need someone who's dedicating full time to constantly improving and like offering the knobs. It's a rare instance where with channel like entrepreneurs, owners, mods, you actually want as many knobs as possible because everyone has a slightly different point of view. And I think it's actually a pretty opposed to how we've traditionally built things because our focus is almost always solve for the default, like make it easy for the average user, fewer knobs, like just like get the right choice. And so I think it actually makes a lot of sense in a world where something like Cura that is dedicated to channels and community management is going to have maybe a different product philosophy that will actually satisfy uh, you know people who are trying to build community with channels. And so I think that is in an optimistic view, like that's why I want to get to like a nice resolution where we've simplified it in the Farcaster app. That's really about providing you distribution, which I actually think is useful for people to grow things. But like the power features, the things that you really care about for your core community, probably should live in a slightly different, kind of UI UX different app. And the beauty of Farcaster is like you can simultaneously use both, right?
I wonder if. Oh, sorry, Russ. I'm just going to ask a question here because you've kind of touched on it. If you could speak on the difference between decentralized and on chain, because I think it's decentralized at the protocol level, but it doesn't mean that it's on chain. So it's, I think on Farcaster at least, if I'm not mistaken, the only thing that's on chain are the FIDs, right? Would you say that in the future channels will be on chain or decentralized?
Yeah, so the way to think about it is just because it's on chain doesn't mean it's decentralized, and just because it's decentralized, um, you know, like uh, that it. Well, I actually think decentralized is like a broader category, like actually in the sense that like it is, you can have things that are decentralized that are not on chain, like Blue Sky, Mastodon. That is a decentralized architecture for a social network that has nothing to do with the blockchain. Um, and so the way I think about it is FIDs, as you point out, the kind of core identity primitive under the hood for Farcaster users is the thing that's on chain, and that there's like actually a specific set of properties that's really nice about a blockchain that allows you to kind of have sovereign control over like the core identity primitive for yourself. You can have kind of the recovery process, all this stuff that we've kind of tried to abstract away from most users. You can actually go do that. So that's, I think, pretty powerful. I suspect that there's a version of channels. You could just think of it as like, FID is Farcaster ID, CID, right? Like a channel ID. And then this actually would solve some of the issues. Like people have wanted to rename their channel. Well, the way the channels work now is like they were pretty simply implemented. And like having a CID would allow you to say, oh, in the same way that you can change your Farcaster username or swap in your ENS, you could do the same thing for a channel, right? Because instead of following the username, you're actually following like this kind of like ID number. Again, all this is like esoteric at the protocol level, but it's important because it allows for that kind of flexibility. And so I think that's like one basic example. I do think over the medium term, and this is not just for channels, but I think more broadly, um, L2s have basically gotten ridiculously cheap. And I think that there's probably more stuff that we can slowly kind of either mirror or move out of the protocol, or not move out of the protocol, or shift where it exists. I don't know if it's a priority or if it like, sounds good. And then the reality is like Snapchain actually can just do this really well. And like Snapchain itself is, completely decentralized in the sense of like read access and ability to kind of participate in it. And so I think, I think this has actually always been a point of contention from like the beginning of like Farcaster is actually not decentralized because it's not on chain. And it's like, okay, there are crypto social network protocols that are entirely on chain, yet they don't have any users. And so it's like, who cares? Like it's a science experiment at that point. So I think a bit of like what we are trying to do is be as pragmatic as possible. And it's much faster to not put stuff on chain because once stuff is on chain, it just takes a long time to iterate. And then similarly, once stuff is in Snapchain, it takes a long time to iterate. Thus, why channels have stuck around as like kind of this thing in the Farcaster app, because it allowed us when we were spending more time on it to change things pretty easily on our end. But I do think it's getting to the point where it's like we need to make a call here, and it's not a unilateral call. It's not a sudden call. It's a like get a bunch of input from people, make sure those folks can offer their point of view, but also get to a place where people are probably not going to get 100% of what they want. But if we all agree that, hey, we're gonna kind of move forward in this direction and simplify certain things, but allow for kind of permissionless innovation within other clients, I think that's probably the right compromise.
This idea that when you were talking about how people want to be specific, they want to have different knobs. I think of this idea that with interesting products, they tend to be easy to navigate, but capable of being mastered. And with Farcaster now being both the name of the app and the protocol, that really offers this ability, right? You guys can innovate on both levels. You can make the user interface easy to navigate, but you can open up possibilities on the protocol level for other people to master and for other people to kind of present it in any kind of way they want. And so that is awesome for Farcaster. um, But I wanted to loop back. I know we have just 2 more minutes here, but to loop back on just one more point when you said earlier about aligning the interests of Farcaster, maybe talking about the user interface and attracting more users, and aligning that with making sure that as soon as the users get onboarded, there is a textured tapestry of content that they can get, that they can grasp onto, so that they can be sticky. Um, if not for channels, as of like 2 months ago, maybe if we were thinking about leaning away from channels, how would we otherwise have solved that to make the feed a little bit more diverse and maybe personalized?
Yeah, so we were constantly running experiments with our algo, which I think has like a lot of baggage with that word. The the way to think about it though is AI is actually, you know, it's obviously amazing and it's done all this stuff. But traditionally, the LLM world really actually didn't improve like feed technology. Like that's actually a different branch of AI. It's machine learning. Like what powers the TikTok algo or Meta's algos. Um, but that's changing because LLMs are actually getting so smart and so smart. Put quotes on that and cheap, right? So DeepSeek and like if you think about it, like okay, we now have O3 on ChatGPT, like 4.0 a year ago was blowing people's minds. That price per query is going way down. So one thing we're doing, we're actually experimenting with this in trending topics. So we're working on getting better at this. Like we had 4 different trending topics yesterday. I think it was like whatever the showdown that was happening on X, the Switch 2, Circle IPO, and then NBA Finals, right? That was all just auto categorized. It actually didn't take anything from channels. And that's just an LLM kind of going through, casts that get some level of engagement. We basically, you can think of it as just like we ask an LLM, we feed it the entire cast, including an image, and say, what's this about? Give us 5 keywords. It's an oversimplified version of that. And what's important is so much of what a cast is 2 things that I think are tricky traditionally, or same thing with a tweet. Is one, you have an image, right? So like traditionally, like the ML like only can really look at the text, and it's not going to be able to look at an image. Whereas you can actually you can have the LLM like look at it, and it does visual recognition, and then it can like connect the image to the text, right? And then the second is a lot of what a tweet or a cast has is there's a lot of like subcontext that you and I, because we're like online and we've read a bunch of other things, like you can kind of like roughly know, oh, this is in like subtle reference to the meta. Like I always think of like if you look at an average 6 cast, if he's talking about like something that's happening today, like it's expected that like what's going on first, and then that is responding to that. The LLMs are actually decent, not perfect, but like decent at doing that. And so I'm optimistic that here's the vision. The kind of mixing topics and communities is the fundamental like original sin of channels. And I think a world where topics are inferred, and that can happen in a channel or not in a channel. You can be the biggest account, you can be the smallest, but ultimately like you can actually kind of categorize with AI this stuff, and then based on what people either tell you they're interested in or the revealed preference of like liking and spending time on casts, like you can get more of that. And then channels, I think the thing that's valuable about channels is being able to build communities, which they're not actually topics. They are communities that might have a theme or something that they're, like organized around. And that can still feed into algos and get discovered. But I actually think like if I give everyone a choice, it's like build a community product or push this into the protocol as a way so that you can actually build a community, or this thing is if you're interested in X topic, like a way to get discovered. I actually think most people who are serious about channels today, despite them kind of being in this holding pattern, they're going to vote overwhelmingly in the community path. And so I think you can solve both, but in different tactics, which I think it'll take some unlearning, and that will be challenging. But if we can do that right, it's you find like-minded people at a topic level just through the algo. And no, that sounds kind of crazy. And then when you find those people and you want to go deeper and you actually are looking for the human interaction on that, right? Imagine if you have a like gardening, right? Ted, you can stay on, Ted. Like I'm just finishing up. I'm doing one of my rants. But you could imagine I come to the network, I'm interested in gardening, I like a few casts, and then I'm starting to see more people in gardening related communities, and then I actually find the right one. It's like gardening in Brooklyn, or like, DIY, like farmers at home, or whatever the right like group, and you really vibe with that subgroup. That's great. So you're not joining this like mega sized like subreddit equivalent of gardening. Instead, you're actually finding your people within that topic. And I think that is the thing that would be great if we could drive towards it, but it does require us to kind of like make a call and bring people along, and make sure, they feel like they're contributing to that decision as well.
This has been awesome, Dan. I know you've given us 30 minutes of your time today, and I know you're extremely busy. So I want to say thank you. This has been really fun to dive into channels, but really more broadly, building community on Farcaster, and your insights and the thinking that's happening behind the scenes. I think our audience was very grateful for your time too, and for the ability to learn the direction that we're going together. Because though you guys are in the office building Farcaster, we feel that we are co-building with you, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak to you.
Awesome. Well, I very much am appreciative of everyone who spends time on Farcaster, because you're 100% right in that. I mean, it's a social network, right? So there's no building in isolation. You can build all the technology you want, but people don't use it and like actually, build friendships and communities and spend time on it. Nothing. It's like that line from OpenAI. OpenAI is nothing without its people. It's like a social network is nothing without its people. So, all right, cheers, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you, Dan.
Dan.
Cool. We're going to bring Ted and Nounish Prof up now. Appreciate your patience waiting.
Hi, Ted.
Prof, I put you backstage, and I think you might be getting a prompt to come back on stage. Can you double check? And if not, can you leave and come back? Sorry. This is my first time using the backstage button, so didn't even know Riverside had that. Yeah.
I didn't
Okay.
either.
So
I was like, uh-oh. I joined, and then I was like, uh-oh.
no, that's fine. We literally said that it was going to be like flying. What's the saying? Jumping out of a plane and building a
Building
parachute
the
on the way
plane
down.
as you're flying it.
Yeah, yeah. Because Riverside is not built for this. This is more of a podcasting platform, but we do what we can. And this was a fun start, chatting with Dan, and I feel speaking to you and Nounish Prof when they come back on is a great follow up, especially you,
Yeah.
because I feel like the TED channel has been, hey Prof, how you doing? Good,
And I'm
thanks.
back.
Hey,
GM.
Prof.
Hello, GM.
I was saying I feel like the TED channel was again one of those early channels that took on the challenge of what can we do with this new primitive. And I mean, beyond that, you also leverage other tools like Hypersub to drive attention and value to the people who wanted to participate in the conversation. So, what are your thoughts just generally about channels? And you heard the conversation with Dan. It's not just about channels; it's about community.
Yeah. I thought, first off, thank you for having me. Thank you for celebrating channels. I think everybody um, can get behind the idea of finding and building community online, especially in today's day and age where it's feels almost harder than ever. Um, I basically started experimenting with my channel almost as like a microblogging site. It was like, okay, everything that I think that I would want to go read about, like, a longer form post or something that I thought was like uniquely me, I would just put in my TED channel as a microblogging location. And we had no idea what it would be. And I think it was a very personal site that was unique to me. Whereas I think other personal sites like July or Six like grew embodied something larger than just like a personal microblogging site, I guess. They like really had, a vibe around them. And so I think I looked at those and was like, oh, that's really cool. Like other people are like, I understand the vibe and like I can relate to this. And so I think those are really interesting. But I was like, oh, mine is like really somewhat just for me in a way that I don't necessarily know if it was that community building. It was just like, here is kind of like a one, not broadcast because I would engage with everybody. And then on the other hand, Hypersub, and I think Nounish Prof can talk about this as well, was like my answer to like how am I building community? Where am I like cultivating a vibe? And it was in kind of like a more closed network group chat with a group of people who I think at its max, like there was probably like 45 people super active in the group chat, which was great, where we like learned and grew together. So that is a little bit of my point of view on my experience to date with channels, or my own personal channel.
And to maybe contrast that with the way Prof very prominently uses channels through GM Farcaster and a lot of the kind of nouns surfaces. Do you want to talk about that too?
Yeah, so for GM Farcaster, we kind of treat it's really been basically our website. So we treat it very differently than other channels. And I think that's probably the challenge of channels right now, is there's so many different ways to use them that it becomes difficult for the Merkle team to build for them and to make them the most, to really find the thing that makes them pop. But for GM Farcaster, we pretty much use that as like, this is the place where if you want to know what the heck is GM Farcaster, what's been going on, where can I find their episodes, what's coming up, all of that is in the GM Farcaster channel. And even our merch, if you look at our merch, it's /GM Farcaster, all one word. It's like any shirts we've done, anything like that. So we've kind of leaned into the channel as sort of our .com, even though we do have a .com, but really we direct more people to the channel than anywhere else. And I think that's been super useful of like, we're about Farcaster, so find our information on Farcaster and direct people there rather than directing them elsewhere. So that's been very intentional. In some of the other communities I'm in, they're different. So for example, Builder DAO was one of the first 20 channels, so /builder. And that's really focused on Builder DAO and the Nouns Builder community and other DAOs that are built on top of Nouns Builder, like Purple, like Yellow, things like that. So that's been a little bit more community focused, but still serves a little bit more informational. So there's some discussions, but it still feels a little bit more, here's where you find the proposals that are happening, here's what's going on, here's a newsletter, et cetera. Again, although Nouns Builder has a website, it's very much the protocol website. It's where you go to create a DAO or to learn how to do that, et cetera. So the channel has served as sort of a big communication tool that sort of takes the place of a website as well. And then the Nouns channel is a whole different animal. There's multiple mods for that. It really became the central hub of the whole Nouns community at one point, where we shifted from Discord and moved into the Nouns channel. There's been a little bit of shift back to some Discord channels and a little bit of shift, but it still remains the primary sort of public facing place where people are discussing things that are happening in Nouns. And that one is definitely more community focused, more a lot of different contributors who add to that channel. So that's a little bit different as well. I think there's just, again, there's so many different ways to use a channel that I find for me as a user, what I appreciate is that a couple different ways. One is that community focus. Another one is like when I want to talk about something and I don't necessarily know where people are talking about that thing, I can find a channel that's where that's happening. So for example, there's ephemeral events that happen, like the Super Bowl, like the Oscars, like Crypto the Game was a perfect example of that, where like I didn't know who was playing, who was involved, who cared about this. I could go to the Crypto the Game channel and see everything that was going on regarding that. And that I think was a super useful aspect of channels for something that was temporary, but it provided a great surface area for multiple contributors to add their thoughts as to what's going on and be able to go, I can just go right to that channel and find it. I don't have to search a hashtag. I don't have to wait for the algo to pick it up. I can go to this one spot and see where everyone who's talking about this, find out like who's, maybe even get some alpha or some strategy from seeing who's doing what and how they're playing. So I think there's just so much opportunity here. We just haven't quite cultivated the best approaches yet.
I think Rez said something to me when we were first conceiving Official Channels Day as a celebration that really struck me. Actually, it might have actually been over coffee, where we literally were just meeting up for the first time, and then we were like, "What can we do together?" And then this kind of came from that. Rez said, and you can correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but something to the effect of, on Farcaster, you can have these really topical discussions, casting into the ether. But if you want to have really deep conversations with people beyond just like the broad topic, you go into channels and you can really dive deeper into that conversation. Rez, if I'm misquoting you, please let me know. But I think it was something to that effect. What are your thoughts just generally about deep conversations happening on Farcaster? Is channels the way?
I think it happens sometimes a little bit more organically, where you cast something or someone else casts something and then you reply or pick up on a reply. So I think that happens, but I think when you're intentionally looking to talk with other people about a certain topic, sometimes channels can be helpful in doing that, or want to see what people are saying about a certain thing. Channels is an easy place to go for that content. So I think it can still happen even without outside of channels, and it does happen. I just find it easier to locate those folks that I want to talk to about a certain thing if they're not normally in my feed. That's where I've found new people to follow, new people to chat with, things like that. So I think that's where that can happen. Ted, I don't know if you have another thought on that.
I I love what Humpty said about like, oh, being, and I guess it was Res, where you can go deep in channels. I feel, I think discovery is the hardest thing on any social platform, and I think we're a little like warped into thinking it's easy because we've been on social platforms, some of them for like decades, and then TikTok has like nailed the video algorithm, which is very, very hard to replicate in text-based format. It's just, how do you even do it? And so I have found that seeing what other people cast in different channels has been like a really great way for discovery, and then to like go a couple layers deeper in some of those conversations. Do I wish that the UX to getting there and kind of like finding the different channels was a little bit easier? Yes. But I do think once there is a group of people posting about something, it it also serves as like a, how do I guess like taking a step back, it's like Rez posts in the Deadhead channel a lot. And so I think it's like great because then somebody who comes to Farcaster who looks at their feed and they're like, oh, nobody here is into the same things that I'm into, but then they search like Deadheads. They find the channel and they see like, oh, Rez has casted about this over and over and over again. Like, this is somebody that I can talk to about my like very like my obsession, like my passion. And I think that channels like provide something that's a little bit less ephemeral than the feed, so that it does allow for a little bit of this discovery. I think Dan's made a point of like the average user doesn't want to search, so I think we need to do a better job like surfacing that or figuring it out. But yeah, like you can get really, really deep on some of those conversations in channels, or know that you'll come back to it like the next day.
Thank you for the Deadheads shout out. But that is really, to me, that is an example of how some of this content can really get very esoteric. And if you're not already outside of the internet deeply ingrained in the community, you wouldn't really necessarily get it. But another way, being something that Dan said earlier, I don't know if you guys heard that segment, but we're all obviously very sympathetic to the need for Farcaster to grow its user base and have its own kind of growth metrics and North Star. And for me, Deadheads, or even other communities that I'm part of, but if I'm hanging out with a Deadhead IRL, I'm more likely to be like, yo, you should come on to Farcaster. We have a channel here where other Deadheads are talking about Grateful Dead stuff, right? So I'm curious to hear about both, like from Ted through your TED channel and Prof with your surface areas. What your vision is in expanding your communities beyond Farcaster in a way that might actually really align with how Farcaster wants to also grow its user base.
Prof, you want to take this one first?
Yeah, I don't know that I mean, beyond like the crypto part of the outside Farcaster, I haven't really given this particular area much thought in terms of onboarding. I mean, I shouldn't say that because GM Farcaster, I think, does that because but it doesn't necessarily do it within Farcaster. Like we're sharing GM Farcaster on YouTube and Spotify and all the places and Twitter. So yes, we can then filter people into that channel and say, hey, if you want to learn more, here's a good place to start. We see other people doing that more than we necessarily do it. Like we see people who are onboarding folks to Farcaster, they'll often point to GM Farcaster and send them to the channel to find here's content about what they talk, about Farcaster if you want to learn more kind of thing, to help get oriented. We've also had a lot of people who come in, join the chat, and watch the show, who then get more deeply connected into Farcaster. And we've seen that happen in a number of different ways. Yes to Crypto is my first, thought on that one, where he literally bought an ENS because he wanted to make sure it was showing up in the Unlonely chat when we had that one. So, and then he became just much more active within various parts of Farcaster because of connecting with other people in the chat, other people from Farcaster within the chat. So there's like a lot of different ways this can kind of play out, but we definitely have seen people be filtered to our channel when they're new. Beyond that, nothing's really coming to mind, but I can see opportunities there as we grow something like Cast Out and grow that game in its own like unique way. But also the channel serving as like, we don't have a website for Cast Out. We don't really have any intention of creating one. We'll probably just use the Cast Out channel for that because we don't really need that additional thing to update and to do when we're going to be sharing it in the channel anyway. So we'll just point people in that direction. So if that starts to grow and become something a little bit bigger, or Farcaster Trivia, another good example, then that might be something that onboards folks. But that's the only thing I can think of in terms of that particular aspect.
And just on that, I want to connect the dots with what we were talking about with Dan, which was a lot of people test their products as a channel first, and then they build the actual product once they have some proof of that concept and interest, right? And then with that core community, they can go on and build it into something much bigger that functions outside of just a community. And I think what you're talking about with trivia and cast out, these are products, and you
Right.
are building them in public, and you're using channels as a way to organize people and conversations. And then if this wants to be a mini app, if this wants to be a mobile app that's available on the App Store, you already have your first core co-builders that can come and just continue to give you feedback and continue to help you develop that outside of Farcaster. So I think it's really interesting to hear from you as a builder that this is how you're doing it, and you literally lean in hard onto Farcaster as a way of proving the value of what you're building. I want you to recognize that too, because that's exactly what you're doing, and it's really
Yeah.
wonderful to hear.
And I do think that channels is a great like first stop, on the road to a mini app, so to speak. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you're not quite there and you're testing a concept, but you can still want a place where you can sort of bring folks together that might be interested in that particular thing. So yeah, definitely. I think that's a great point there, Humpty. And I
Rez, did you have a follow up question to that, or sorry, Ted, were you gonna give your because I think the question was for both you and
yeah.
Nounish.
I don't know if I have anything in particular to add. I think it would be incredible if you could. I think one of the original visions was if you could onboard directly into a channel. And I still think that could be very powerful. You see a version of this with Substack, where you can like land directly on someone's page and then see everything that they want and everything that they are interested in, and then also their referrals and other people in the community. Or even on Instagram now, you can like invite somebody to become part of a broadcast channel. I think it's a little bit different. It's a closed kind of group chat that's very interactive and dynamic. And so maybe one day we'll get there, but I think we have to play around with multiple iterations to see what will work.
Excellent. Well, we're reaching the end of this segment here. Ted, Nanish Prof, thank you so much for your time. Honestly, this has been
You're
really
welcome.
fun to kind of do this in public. And I'll tell you, the feedback on YouTube right now is that this is really hitting, like this type of content.
Yay.
Rez,
Great.
this is mostly your doing. So I appreciate you collaborating with me on this and bringing all these amazing people together.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Ted.
Bye. Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you. And hi, Johnny. Bye.
Bye. Bye bye.
Hey, Johnny, GM.
PM, how's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us on such short notice. It's really great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So yeah, we really wanted to have you on here because I remember this conversation that we had actually at FarCon right after the keynote discussions where we kind of went into channels a little bit. At the time, the direction of channels was a little uncertain, and it sounds like now there's quite a bit more energy about how the Merkle team might actually lean back into it and see how to collaborate with community members. And we want to make sure that everyone's voices is heard. So tell us a little bit about your very big and mighty memes channel.
Yeah, so let's see, quick history of the memes channel. I was posting memes on Farcaster before there were channels. I just thought it was funny, and it kind of just grew, I think, as the network grew. And then randomly, I was in LA and I was like, hey, I'm gonna organize like a little Farcaster meetup, which is so funny because like 4 people came or 5. I think it was like me, Phil, and Dan, and maybe like 1 or 2 other people. And Dan was like, hey, we're thinking about doing this experiment like around channels. uh, they had played around with like an NBA channel right before the first FarCon. It did super well. Everyone was really excited about it. I mean, I remember at FarCon 1, everyone was like, channels are the thing. And so at that meetup, he's like, I'm thinking about kind of expanding this idea to other channels, you know, but I want to have a channel lead for each channel. I want to have kind of a point person. So would you want to pilot that with memes? And I was like, hell yeah. And so that was kind of the beginning of the journey. And then as the network grew, of course, the channel grew. And it was an experiment, I think, that both Dan and the Merkle team and then his sort of group of channel leads were all really excited about and putting a lot of effort into. And, I think it's really hard. I'm very, I'm sympathetic towards Dan's comments on like, this is something we spend a lot of time on, and it's just really, really hard. And like, I totally get it. And I've been on like the front lines of that difficulty around setting expectations, around managing spam, managing access, trying to make sure that you have really high quality content. and it's a ton of work for basically very little upside. Like you're not really making money. Like you're not really getting materially more distribution, and so uh, I I get why they kind of stopped working on it and moved on to other things. Um, so that's disappointing, but at the same time, it's like encouraging to see them sort of probing and asking, hey, like, what could we do here? And so, like, I know yesterday the conversation got kind of kicked off. I feel like I touched a nerve, like my response got a lot of engagement, and I wasn't expecting that, but it's exciting to see. And so there's a lively group chat discussion, I think, with Humpty and a number of other channel leads, you could say, that are just brainstorming and trying to find what's the path through the design space that results in some meaningful outcome.
Yeah, so Humpty was also saying earlier that citing that a lot of users when they first come on Farcaster, before they dive into being an entrepreneur in the Farcaster space, channels might be their first touch point. And Johnny, you obviously are also building on Farcaster through Fabric in the since the very early days. And Fabric also has a channel that has a vibrant community where people are posting content. How do you see channels as a way beyond a personal interest and kind of building community through memes? Like this is also an arm of your communications and how you engage with your users and your Fabric community. Can you tell us a little bit about that too?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. It's like it's community building for a person, for a startup, for a brand, for an interest. That's what's so, I think, powerful about channels, is that they're these kind of general containers for community building. And now what that community wants to be about is, of course, up to them and the creator of the channel. That's what I think is so cool, is that you have something like, say, the Fabric channel, which is really us trying to provide distribution to people that are using the products we build. But then you have something like Hire, which is a token, and it's about memes, and it's like this aspirational kind of brand. And then you have something like DGen, you have like Reply Guys, and you have, I mean, the the texture, like is of like how different these communities are, and their economics and their culture and the vibe. I think it's sort of sad to me that channels got deprioritized, because I think what makes things interesting are their differences, whether that's an individual person, whether it's a city, whether it's a company. You're like looking for, like, it's like, I remember I like lived in San Francisco in 2012, 2013, and I remember just thinking, like, everything here is the same. Like everyone is the same. They all talk about the same shit. They go to, like, everyone's working at the same companies. It's boring. It's homogenized. And whereas if there's other places in the world you go to and it's super different. Like, for example, you go to a party in New York and you're like, oh wow, I met someone in media and in publishing and in tech and in finance, and you get this like intersection of like different interests and cultures, and that's what makes cities, at their best, interesting. It's what makes people interesting, and I think it's what made Farcaster interesting, as opposed to, like, without that, you end up with this kind of like averaging of a network, which effectively is like everybody just engagement farming. It's like everybody just trying to surf the algorithm to get engagement, to get distribution, and it's fucking boring. Like, it's like not a place that I really want to hang out. Whereas what's far more interesting is a network topology, that has peaks and valleys, and super different cultures. That's what I want. And I think channels are so far the best, um, the best means by which to achieve that I'm aware of.
We certainly agree with you. So seeing that your response to Dan, and I think I know the one that you're referring to, but it was such a high, maybe a high leverage point in that conversation. Um, if it were up to you, what would you change today about the way channels are implemented, managed to make your life as a channel owner, a moderator, curator easier?
Mm. It's a good question, and it's a really hard question. I think the one thing that I would do is I would get them out of Farcaster, because the surface area for iteration must be increased in order to in order to like thread the needle and like find the thing that works. So what I mean by that is Farcaster is a protocol and it's a client. And so the client piece, the only entity that can iterate on the client piece is Merkle, because it's a closed source piece of software that they have centralized control over, changes on. So that means that the bottleneck of innovation is like with Merkle. But with the protocol, anybody can build on that. And so there's like the surface area of iteration and basically figuring out what works is much bigger at the protocol level. And so I think that's what channels needs. So for example, if you talk to Sahil at Cura, like total channel maxi, really like, wanting to explore and do more there. And I think that's really great. There needs to be more people basically like iterating on the substrate of channels in order to find, the formula that works. So that would be like step number one. I think step number two that's really hard is what you just brought up, which is this kind of like moderation question. I think the central challenge is how do you provide high signal, high quality content in your channel without putting outsized work on the shoulders of the channel owner? Because I have like literally I've gotten sort of mud sucked into spending hours and hours and hours of my day curating the channel, which is great for the people that are like paying attention to it, but sucks for me and is not sustainable. And so there needs to be some kind of solution wherein I can be the kind of MC, but I like it's not all on me to like separate the signal from the noise in the channel. And the other hard thing is that this is a challenge over time. Like what I want as a channel owner is probably going to change on like day one when I make my channel, and on like day 100 after I've gotten my first 1,000 users. And so that like journey of the channel owner, the tools that are available to them, it's like it needs to be, you got to get that dialed in, and it's hard. It's like super hard. But I mean, I guess like who cares if it's hard? Yeah, life is fucking hard. Building software is hard. Like figure it out, iterate on it. And so yeah, I don't know. That's what those are the two things that I would look at.
Yeah, one surface that I noticed that has a lot of debate on is whether or not the channel access should be permissionless. I think there's some very strong opinions about maybe in favor of channel owners that if you make it completely permissionless, then people, if it's just like a hashtag, that the spam issue would just be completely out of control. And you touched a little bit on, cleaning up the feed and making sure, curating, spending hours and hours on it. How much of that can be reduced to or abstracted away from the channel owner if spam management on a client level or like the protocol level could be better? Is that a big leverage point?
I think it is, and I think Sahil from Cura has like they've been doing a lot of work on this, and the stuff that I've seen as far as how you can seed the weighting of user scores based on the channel lead themselves and like what they're liking and interacting with, I think is like a lot is like leverage creating. Like it reduces a lot of work, and it's a way of passively kind of separating the signal from the noise. Like you're essentially just using the engagement of the channel lead as inputs on ranking, on like user ranking within the context of a channel. So for example, you might have a bunch of people who have very high scores on the network globally, like say Dan and Varun, right? But if I, as the channel lead, am not interacting with them frequently, then they'll have much lower relative scores within the context of a channel. So I think there's like lots of clever techniques that like Sahil's team is doing to basically get a very, very good out of the box feed for a channel. But again, like they like, you know, as much dependency as can be removed from Merkle for, say, the Cura team, I think the better. Like you want more teams building on like a public substrate as opposed to just like fragile APIs. So yeah, anyway, to answer your question, yes, I think there's like a lot that can be done there to reduce the effort on the channel owner.
Well, thank you for your very eloquent insights. Humpty and I have been cannibalizing this conversation, but I want to make sure if you can jump in too if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I'm always the host, so I'm enjoying kind of being a passive participant here. You've been asking great questions. I mean, I guess I don't know. I don't think we've really touched too much on like Hypersub. I know we talked about the channels that you run. I think Hypersub was just one of those products that was very early, and many of us have used and continue to use to build community on Farcaster. I know we just had Nownish Prof on and Ted, and both of them have two of the more popular subscriptions on Hypersub. I know I have my own, and I'm still iterating on it just because, like you said, just because your community was launched on day one and it looks a certain way doesn't mean that it will continue to look the same way, on day 100. So that's kind of my journey where I'm at right now with where my channel started and my own personal journey as a creator. I'm on day 100. And so I wonder if like you can talk about the evolution of Hypersub as well and how you're thinking about how it can continue to add value to creators as a point of contact with their community and how it may have to evolve in the future as channels also evolve.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think Hypersub is a really good way of kind of figuring out who are your ride or die supporters. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of things that you as a creator can do on chain, and it's super easy for people to have kind of like flyby, like little interactions, whether it's like buying or selling a token or an NFT or whatever. But I think that there's a real sort of step function increase in signal when someone's like, no, 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 I'm going to mint 6 months or a year. I'm making a long-term commitment to supporting your success. And then, the inverse of that basically being the creator saying, well, I'm going to share in the upside of my growth. I think that that's like a really powerful kind of economic relationship that you can have out of the box without any real configuration. So that's the goal of Hypersub. I think it's really great for creators like early on, and I think it kind of scales with them as they grow. In fact, I think that's where it starts to really shine. Is when people start to grow, they can start to like get real material upside. So yeah, as far as how it grows with channels, I mean, it's kind of TBD. We had a really solid integrations with channels, I think, early on, and people were using it a lot. But I think it matters a lot, like what the what the moderation, the kind of like access, because if people are giving you money, they're going to expect something in return. And so if they're paying to get access to a channel, they're not seeing their content in that channel. I think like there's a like that gets a little that gets kind of that can get hairy. You got to like set expectations. So yeah, to me, it's like the roadmap for Hypersub is continuing to like provide that economic model. It's continuing to facilitate like meaningful connections between, creators and their supporters, and drafting off of the growth of Farcaster. We had a really good year last year, and a lot of that was because we were downstream of Farcaster's growth. So insofar as we can position ourselves to like ride the next wave of channels, if such a wave exists, like we're excited to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the fact that you all keep thinking about the problem. For I'll speak for myself and my community of creators, right, and how we can bridge the gap between them and our communities and the conversations we want to have with them. I think of YouTubers and how they leverage tools that are usually used in traditional media, but there's still something missing in terms of like how we can enable some novel interaction with them, like airdrops, for instance, which I think
Mm-hmm.
works quite well on Hypersub, and I used it quite heavily. For the content that I create, it was an easy way of getting people to feel recognized beyond a point of sale, right? So
Yeah.
I want to thank you for that. Honestly, I think it's been
Yeah.
really fun, and just I'm excited to see your continued kind of evolution of your thinking, as well as how this will progress into the future.
Well, thank you for using Hypersub and sharing Hypersub. So really appreciate it, and thank you guys so much for having me on.
Yeah, appreciate it, Johnny.
Thank you, Johnny.
Cool. All right. Bye.
Bye bye. Cool. We've got
Bye.
Christopher up next. How you doing, Chris?
Beggy.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Happy to be here. Happy to join for Channel Day, official Channel Day.
Yeah. It's so nice to have you on here because we've had Dan speak 30 minutes earlier. I don't know if you were able to catch that, but he definitely spoke a bit about how the protocol aspect of channels beyond just our direct exposure through the Farcaster user interface. And you are obviously yourself building a Farcaster channel, Uno. So we would love to hear your perspective on the developments of channels, and also with your personal experience running so many big channels.
Yeah, so I think I originally started out not running any channels and wanting to build a client, and then I think channels came out in December of 2023 as a fully featured experience, and not just simply the hand-selected variant that came out in that summer. And I think my experience has been, I think, as most of the other moderators have experienced it, which is a little bit up and down with some of the moderation tools and some of the spam, some of the tooling that has been offered, both in the community and also from Farcaster themselves. I do think that clients get the opportunity to have an opinion about how their communities can create together with them as an engineering stack. And Uno has been a very different mindset for this, particularly because we want to lean more into the data of the protocol, particularly. But it's been a very different experience from what others have experienced for their own channels. I think passive moderation instead of active moderation is the best way to get culture out into the open and to get people to express themselves a little bit more freely. That's comparing the Twitter style of channels and communities that they have with the Reddit style of channels and communities. Reddit has been curated since day one. Twitter has not been curated at all since day one. It's mostly been using the data to slowly guide conversations and have a particular rhetoric that goes through the feed. And I think Uno will probably sit somewhere in the middle. So we'll probably offer a good bit of intelligent detail into the channel communities that they have. On the Farcaster side, I'm a mod for fitness, outside, and the unofficial Uno channel. I think the fitness one has been pretty. It's been a lot of work at times, and then sometimes it's been no work. When we first started to push it in February of 2024, we had 24,000 people in the channel, and there was a lot of spam, a lot of content moderation that other channels didn't have to deal with. And I think over time we haven't moderated it actively, just because the spam filters and the labeling mechanics that Warpcast at the time was pushing were helpful enough, but yeah, it's been kind of crazy to see the journey between the two. Yeah.
I wonder if you could speak to the fitness channel first of all, because there's, and we talked about this with Dan too. There's currently a group chat on Farcaster where Dan's taking input, about like what channels can be. And Afrochicks this morning, aka Naomi, who's a power user on Farcaster and has a few channels of her own, talked about how when she started to point people towards a channel that had a very specific interest or niche interest, she saw churn drop. And the one channel she quoted here is Firefits, which I think, personally I've used once or twice. I'm not a power user of it, but I can see why people would keep coming back and wanting to share, what they're wearing, outfit of the day or whatever. Have you seen something similar with fitness? And what is your thoughts in terms of like people who come in and join fitness and being able to retain them on Farcaster through fitness?
So churn is a function of the intrinsic value of the brand of the thing itself, and so another way of saying that is that the FireFits brand is pretty dang good, and is therefore able to get people to come back and shop within the FireFits channel every single day, and it has a concerted, curated effort of conversation, and people love that. So there are millions and millions of these esoteric and scaled down, scoped down channels that need to be surfaced to users, but there also needs to be a sort of culture that follows with it as well to ensure that people are keeping a tight loop between between the identity that they want to have for themselves and the identity of the channel itself. So you can see this. You can see that this happen a lot on Reddit, where people are joining a very niche hobby community or subreddit, and they start. I think my favorite example is the I Can't Have Cheeseburger subreddit from back in the day. People would actually talk about cats and their days, and they would talk in cat speak for a long time. And like, you can't service that to people. Like, it's not something that you have to like. You have to see it and then be part of it to then be able to recommend to other people. You can't just like service that at the top level. But it would have very little churn for people that are into that kind of thing. And so you have to have a good mix of high level, everyone gets it. This is what we call social recommendations. That's like fitness or food. But then you have to have a little bit of the more niche topics to offer as well. I think the best channels that I've seen so far are the ones where people are checking in every day with a streak and are contributing content like images or recommendations or asking for something particularly. Yeah.
Rad, yeah. So tell me, so the other common theme here, by the way, that I've been picking up is that people tend to test products in public using channels. What is your experience? You were saying unofficial Uno channel, but it's a channel, and you probably talk about Uno the app. What's your experience of using channels with that in mind? Maybe that's not your intention, but have you seen that be a place where you can have those conversations and help improve your own thinking about how you're building Uno?
Yeah, so I actually have like alerts set up on Uno, so when people actually message into that channel, I know and I can respond quickly to it, usually. And it's also a build in public culture that we're trying to lean into. So the Uno channel is more about the influence of the brand on other people, and also a place for me to get feedback very quickly. Hashtags were huge in the pre-ML days of Twitter, and what they discovered very quickly is that hashtags were actually more noise on the feed than they were helpful. And they started to cut them down and started to reduce their surface area almost to the point where they don't basically exist anymore in the culture of the application. Reddit has done the opposite, and they've wanted to cultivate that feedback loop of identity. I think for a long time people didn't want to join Reddit because it was the Reddit culture, and that was something of a mark, I guess, of their user base. But now it seems to be the resource, and it seems to be ubiquitous across most of the identities of people. The same thing is going to hold true for Farcaster. Building in public is, to a lot of people, like LinkedIn. And so our Uno channel is basically like a LinkedIn, but it's also a great way for us to get feedback instantaneously about our products and what we're building in the betas and so on and so forth. So.
Yeah, I think you pointed to something that for me was it just was my vibe when you were talking about Reddit and these like groups that people join on Reddit. I pulled out my Gundam plastic model because that's literally my vibe. Like I use Reddit for maybe a handful of things. One of them is raw denim, and the other one is like Gundam plastic models because those are such niche interests, right? Where it's like, where else am I going to find people that care to talk about this? Sure, maybe I'm in some Discord servers, but I think that even is a little too curated. Whereas, like on Reddit or these subreddits, you really can have conversations about what you're interested in, what stage of like building you're on, what show you're watching that inspired you to buy the next plastic model, and then have really deep conversations about it with people who care. I think that was, for me at least, one of the things that I found super interesting about Farcaster, or excuse me, channels, that I hope in some way we can continue to have on Farcaster.
Yeah, and it's also a function of the scale of the platform as well. At some point, there's a critical mass of conversation where you're not going to be able to keep up with what's happening on the feed in a timely fashion. For Uno, I have the entire feed as a reverse chronology. There's some filtering, clever filtering that's happening on our back end, so it looks not particularly like a pure follow feed, but in my mind, the opportunity to discover those deep and those highly engaging conversations is a function of the signals that we get from the machine learning that we put onto each of the different pieces of content that's shared on the platform. And channels are just one helpful hint into getting us into that mode for the user in that feed. So you probably were self-selecting and getting a really good sense of the communities because you casually searched. And so that's why it took Reddit 10.5 years for it to hit a critical mass of users. But you had a group chat, which was probably no more than 250 users on an active basis, maybe 4 or 5 posts over the week, and you could casually check in on people. But if you go into some of those communities now, there are subreddits that are larger than Farcaster and that are operated by a moderation team of like 10 or 15 people. And the feed moves so fast in those small communities now, even though they have really good depthful conversations, the ability to be able to curate those experiences on a per moderator basis in the Farcaster realm is going to be too much, I think, for most users. So I would like to see more machine learning and more algorithmic serving of content so that you guys can keep having those deep conversations and discover new interests. Yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you so much. I mean, honestly, for your time here, it's been really fun. We're excited for the continued development of Uno. I know in the group chat on YouTube, people are asking for that, a special code to get in. So, you've got people that are aware of it and are eager to try it out and be a part of your community too.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys, and we'll have more to say later in the summer. So
awesome.
Cool.
We're looking forward to it. Thank you, Christopher.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
All right, next we have Ben excuse me, I just muted myself with Rodeo. Ben, if you're here, please turn on your camera. There we go. We'll go ahead and pin you on the screen here. GM, how are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
We're doing great.
GM, Ben.
GM.
I'll let Rez continue her amazing hosting duties here while I do some casting and tweeting.
Yeah, so Ben, it's really nice to meet you on screen. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on and what you're excited about this reignited conversation around channels, please.
Yeah. So for the folks who don't know, I'm Ben Abraham. I lead growth at rodeo.club. Rodeo.club or Rodeo Creative Network in the iOS App Store is essentially it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a creative social network where we sort of provide a Instagram-esque experience, but instead of likes, people can collect posts or tokens, right? And the folks that we really like to focus in on are artists and creatives, and I sort of differentiate that from sort of like the creators, influencer types. Not to say that they aren't welcome to Rodeo, but but really we're looking for designers, people who are using Midjourney, who have sort of like all sorts of wild workflows. Like I don't know if you can see my background, but this is a creator named Apostrophe, who we just recently did an AMA with. That we hosted on Rodeo, but Apostrophe uses has like a crazy workflow that involves Midjourney and also Krea, and he's also a brand designer at Perplexity. So we just really like to really work with all sorts of different creatives and creators, and get them to put their work on chain. They're already having an experience on Instagram where they're building communities, finding followers. But on Rodeo, we really say like, okay, on Instagram, you're finding your followers. On Rodeo, you're finding your fans, because these are the folks who are collecting, who are engaging more deeply. And then I think in terms of channels, we run the Rodeo.club channel where people, all sorts of collectors love to share their top 9. Very like, a very a la, my top 8 friends back in the MySpace days, for those of us who are old enough to remember that. And what we really love to do with channels and with Farcaster is really like get the community to share like, hey, I've collected all these like hot creators. And when people share stuff in their top 9 in Farcaster, we do some like automatic tagging of those creators. If they're on Farcaster, if they're not, then we got to bring them there, obviously. But it's a really great way to sort of like facilitate community and also discovery. Like we kind of do, it's like, hey, I collected all these hot pieces. I'm sharing it on Farcaster, and then boom, like hits people's feeds, and suddenly it's like, oh, like damn, like Humpty, I didn't know you collected that stuff. That's really cool. I'm gonna collect that now too. So that's sort of the way that we integrate. One of the ways we integrate.
So yeah, the Rodeo channel is obviously a really great surface for people to help each other explore new content. If you didn't have this channel, where else do you see this conversation happening?
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that we're really investigating with our new feature discussions and tools imminently coming out. Stay tuned. It's not really that big of a secret, because we literally just did our release of it, or an early release of it with the AMA. But we're really looking for creatives to house all these conversations, maybe start the conversations in the X's, the Instagrams, the Farcaster, but really find a way to nerd out on Rodeo. So we really want to have that creative social network really bubble on Rodeo, and I think that's why we're really focusing in on this cohort of folks, like people who are using Midjourney, they're using Krea, they're using Runway, they're using Sora, like people who want to debate about prompts or SREF reference style codes and stuff like that. Like it can sometimes, you can get a little lost in the sauce, I think, in some of those other social networks. Which is why we're really saying like, hey, have that conversation on Rodeo, share that work on Rodeo, and then blast it to your networks, because there are other folks who should discover your work there. So we're really trying to bring it to Rodeo, I think, is one of our challenges.
If I may, there was something that you said earlier that struck a chord. By the way, you should have told me what you were wearing, so I didn't wear the same thing.
Oh.
And yesterday we were on a call. We literally were dressing alike.
We literally were similar outfits.
And here we go again. We're just gonna start a rumor.
Yeah.
That, we are the same person, or at least we're raiding each other's closet. But you said something earlier that totally struck a chord. Is this idea of like fans, right? I feel like it's really important to differentiate people who we interact with online and on chain, and what that represents in terms of our relationship, right? Yes. So I think that this idea of like fan or fandom is quite unique, especially in the on-chain space, right? Because we aren't just giving someone a like, right? we're actually collecting something of theirs, which, in my opinion, is a much higher signal. And so to be able to engage them, in your case, in the same platform, to have really deep conversations, very similar to the way that you could and would on channels, I think that that's quite important to be able to surface and have an opportunity to do on these apps like Farcaster and Rodeo.
Yeah, 100, absolutely. And I think the like, I'm gonna nerd out here and like for hey chat, like go search this up on Perplexity or Google. Like I love talking about the creator demand curve. I think it's like my favorite concept to talk about. Where, for folks who don't know, I'm gonna try my best to explain it. Oh, this is the time I wish I had a whiteboard. Humpty, we need a whiteboard. But essentially, like, oh man, x-axis, y-axis. Essentially, where y-axis, lots and lots of people. That's all the people. X-axis, how much they're willing to spend. People, I need everyone to imagine this. Like, go into your mind palace and just watch this. Essentially, where there's lots and lots of people who are maybe following you, it costs nothing. It costs attention. It's free. And then as you move down that creator demand curve, like this, right? Less people, and then the x-axis is cost. So, you know, maybe I am maybe I'm like a brand designer. I've got all these like incredible works that, you know, through magazines and photos and all this other stuff. And I have like, you know, 10,000 followers on Instagram. Costs nothing. It's free. You know, follow me, you like me, it's free. So there's 10,000 people follow me there. And then maybe I also release like a t-shirt or something, and that's maybe $25. So I'm probably only going to get a way smaller size, maybe only like, I don't know, 500 people buy that t-shirt. So they're all the way down here. And then, you know, maybe someone wants to take a design workshop with me, and so they're going to pay me like a $500. So maybe that'll be like way lower here. But that means there's this whole chunk of people in between, you know, the t-shirt people and then the sort of like the followers. Like there's not a really strong relationship being built there. I mean, we can do stickers and maybe like stuff that's midpoint like priced, but I think with, you know, these on-chain interactions, we actually can facilitate, you know, a little bit of like, we can get a little bit less people, but we can actually start taking creators can sort of start collecting value from these interactions through posts, through tipping, through all these things, through all these on-chain interactions. Because suddenly, what's the cost? The cost is there's no cost of ink and like there's no cost of, if you're, you know, printing something, there's no cost of ink, there's no cost of paper if you're printing you know, like postcards or prints or whatever. There's no cost of like cotton if you're, you know, making t-shirts. It's just the fact that this token is on chain and it has value. And suddenly we're showcasing that there's a deeper relationship, because these collectors are quite literally putting money in artists' pockets, saying like, hey, I really like you. I'm interested. I'm really more deeply interested than just the likes you're getting on Instagram. So I think having on-chain interactions is signal. I think we're all collectively, and I mean, you know, Farcaster, just everyone in the space is still figuring out like, well, what does that signal really mean? And lots and lots of experiments across the board to figure out what that value means for people. But I think that is what is exciting. And I think last thing, because I love nerding out about this stuff, you know, it stands really differently from like the existing models of just like tipping, where like, and I mean like Web 2 tipping, like coffee or any of those sort of like, or Instagram used to have like a tipping service where there's no actual exchange. It kind of feels like charity. And we've talked to tons of creators who are like, I feel like I'm begging when I do that, when I go like, can you tip me? Like it feels uncomfortable for them. And then I think there's also like the Patreon model, which, you know, requires a lot more commitment. Kickstarter model, that's also a lot more commitment. So I think with on-chain interactions, especially at the this, you know, like the scale that it's happening and the velocity that it's happening, like I think you essentially are just you're building deeper relationships, incrementally deeper relationships, but with way more people and not requiring nearly as much commitment from these fans who don't want to sink, you know, 10, 15, 20, $100 right off the bat. You know, you can get there, but you start with a little step.
Well, I think to the point that you're making is there are different levels of commitment,
Yeah.
and they're all in different stages of the journey, right? And so when you're talking about Patreon and even Hypersub, I would put them around the same way. They're much further along in the journey, right? Because they want to have a big, they want to signal a bigger commitment to you and your relationship, right? That fanhood. Whereas like there needs to be a better signal pretty high up in that journey or in that funnel, if you will, where you can show that, hey, I'm because like tipping, right? That would be a very signal very high in the stack where you are able to say, hey, this is what I think of you. I appreciate you, but it, like you said, in a way that's not so like where it feels like charity, right? Where there's a deeper meaning to that tip or to that kind of in your case collect on rodeo.
Exactly, exactly. And then I think for like the more, and I'll say less like hardcore like Web3 heads out there, like then you can do all the sorts of like fun stuff, trading, all of that kind of stuff. And I think I want to sort of like emphasize something that feels really important for us at on the rodeo team, and just like on rodeo.club, is that like we're really interested in getting folks who are not in this space to really join. Like Apostrophe didn't really have a whole ton of Web3 context, and I think that's where I really want all of us collectively to sort of push into being like, cool, how do we make this? How do we make you know these sort of like on-chain interactions really palatable, really accessible, and really like these behaviors already exist. Like people, we all know this because we're in this space, but like people collect all sorts of digital objects that are so not on chain. Play Fortnite with like a little cousin, and they're gonna have 10,000 whatever pickaxes or whatever it is, right? So I think it's just a matter of figuring out how do we sort of also make that kind of signaling important, and actually show value not only to the creator but also have people who are collectors, who are fans, really say like, oh yeah, that is a cool thing that I just did for this creator, and I got a cool thing.
Ben, we appreciate your time. Honestly, this has been really fun. Very excited to hear how you continue to explore, conversations, kind of very much on the topic of building community, the way that we are on channels through Rodeo. So thank you. And yeah, definitely looking forward to continuing to try these new experiences.
All right, thank you
Hey
so much.
Ben, before you go, how can we find you on Farcaster?
On Farcaster, I'm Benji, Benje.
All right, everyone, follow Benji. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you all.
Happy
Yeah,
Friday.
for those of you who are following us on the stream, whether you're on X or you are on YouTube, I am live casting each new person that comes on with their username on Farcaster. So I am at Humpty, Humpty, on Farcaster. You can just click on the link and go and follow all these wonderful people who are coming up to speak. Thanks, Rez, for asking that really good question. Who's next? Because it looks like we're stacking up here.
we have Ari next, and then we'll hear from Trish and then Steve.
Okay, you can open this up as a panel too if you want. That way we have more people talking about.
Yeah, yeah, whatever works. This is very open-ended. We're just happy to have our friends here to shoot the breeze with us.
Well, we literally have the next three people that were queued up, which are
Yeah.
these three folks. So let's have this conversation, and we'll have the conversation through about 10. So we have 20 minutes to talk with three amazing friends. GM, everybody, turn on your cameras and microphones. Hello.
Hey Ari, hey Steve, and I don't know if Trish is here. I don't want to put her on the spot
Oh,
if
that's
she's
right.
not ready,
Yeah,
but
no, and also,
please feel
they
free
may
to
be
jump
anon.
in.
Yeah, if you're
Yeah.
anon, you don't have to turn on your camera.
But good to see you, Steve and Ari. Just maybe a quick intro from my end. Ari, I met through the Law and Policy channel on Farcaster, one of the earlier channels that became pretty active, and for a short time we had a DM that congregated all the lawyers and maybe advocates in this space. And Steve is a design whiz. He runs ADHD and Gratitude, among other things, but he's really, to me, everywhere on the internet. I see him wherever I hang out. So
I'm
Um,
gonna ask Ari, what's
yeah.
your username on Farcaster? Because I don't think I follow you.
Sure, yeah, I actually just started following you. My name is Ari. Go by Code of Crypto,
There we go.
CODE Crypto.
So Ari, do you want to start with telling us maybe a little bit of what inspired you to start the Law and Policy channel and how you found community through it? I know there have been, at every major Farcaster event now, you guys have a very strong contingent of participants and people who obviously really care about the crypto space.
Sure, yeah, happy to. And so, as you alluded to, there was a bit of a small group chat with crypto lawyers on Farcaster early on. And when channels became a thing, I think in December of 2023, I just kind of jumped in with some warps and set up this channel. I think channels are interesting because there's a lot of convergence with similar ideas. And so a lot of people set up channels related to law, crypto legal, law and policy around the same time. But it's kind of like taking care of a precious plant, right? You need to kind of water it, pay attention to it, cultivate it over time. It doesn't happen overnight. And so I think initially the channel was a forum to kind of take this out of a group chat into a broader audience, but also be able to kind of post, share, attract new members. But I think it became clear that like without finding ways to kind of enable that URL to IRL connection, we wouldn't be able to kind of fully get to know one another and realize the potential of the channel. And so we started doing some happy hours. We've become hopefully a mainstay at FarCon. We've done some little journal clubs here and there, some like video calls to kind of talk about articles and papers that come out. But really, just it's a forum to enable people to share and learn from one another about matters related to crypto, law, and policy.
As a lawyer by training myself, I realize, a lot of the stuff we write, nobody other than lawyers read. So to me, it's really helpful to have a channel that's really focused on some of the thinking around the very specific technical legal aspect of this space and I would imagine for the curious, maybe they don't work as legal professionals, but they want to see kind of where the legal minds are headed. The Law and Policy channel really has been a great resource for that. So thank you. I mean, just thank you so much for organizing this community. Are there what would, as a channel owner and having this very it's a niche set of community members, what do you think are some features that you would like to see for channels, or what do you wish were different today with channels that would help you grow your community better, or make your day-to-day management curation easier?
Sure. I mean, I think that's something that's been good, but maybe can be optimized down the road. Is that as new content comes in, sometimes I have to manually like notify the channel that by pinning the cast that this is like, so for example, Mike Orcutt wrote a great article through Project Glitch about the Genius Act, right, and stablecoin legislation, which is very timely given Circle IPOing recently. And so every time I see a new post, I pin it to the channel, and that's one way to kind of create exposure and get attention. But it's sometimes a bit of a manual process, and also it's like hard to know what to pin and when, and we want to give everyone enough airtime and opportunity to kind of have their cast pinned. Um, but it's something that something we do manually just to make sure we kind of cycle through content, keep the channel fresh, keep the feed flowing. But I also think that if you're a newcomer to the channel, that's one way I try to get attention and attract more eyes on the content is by pinning the cast. But I do wonder, like, are there other ways to promote newcomers in the channel? Um, Other ways to do things without making it seem so centralized as well, right? Right now, I kind of have full control over things, and I want to be a neutral moderator. And at times in the past, I've had to kind of um, hide certain casts that have been inappropriate or irrelevant, or maybe just not in the right channel. But at the same time, we want to have like a sufficient decentralization ethos of this all and make it a welcoming place that can sustainably uh, enable the content to be shared. So
Well, I think,
What are you?
sorry, I
Oh,
think one of the
sorry,
things,
Jim.
yeah, no, I think one of the things you hit on there is moderation. And I think it's important to think about maybe reframing that to curation. I
sure.
know it literally could be the same thing. As lawyers, I think you and Rez can uh, do a good job at grilling me on that. But basically, I think it's interesting to think about like curation being important so that people can understand the purpose of something, and be able to feel comfortable with sharing ideas with a group of people who might share those interests, right? Because if in a channel you allow for just about anything to be cast into it, there's also, it lacks purpose, and I feel people will be less drawn to having a conversation there. And I
Sure.
think one of the common threads that we've been talking here from the very beginning is channels are a really good way to have very deep conversations about specific topics and ideas or trending themes, right? And so, in terms of like law or design or art, I think it's important to have buckets for these conversations and to be a good channel entrepreneur, as the word is surfacing, um, instead of channel owners, is that we also need to understand how we can curate or guide these conversations in these channels.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve, we haven't heard from you. Oh, sorry, Rez, I keep interrupting you. Go for it.
Oh no, that's all right. I think just to maybe to follow up on that, having being kind of just still, the current manager of the channel. What are your visions for what types of content that you would like to see? What you like that you currently see? What content you would like to see more? Because for example, I think sometimes when there are, certain constitutional issues or something that's being litigated on a high federal level, I feel very riled up, and that's where I would go, post screenshots and of opinions and kind of analyze those opinions. And then sometimes I see a meme on the internet that's just lawyers commiserating, kind of like the other day I posted a
Sure.
meme about, a final version of a document being final 17 times before its final version 17, right? And so, is that type of content the way do you want the space to be where legal adjacent people just hang out? I know in the early days there were also opportunities where maybe through our DMs, our DM group chat, when there were people within the Farcaster community who were building projects and needed legal help, we really were also able to utilize that DM space to maybe help them find some legal need, just some outside counsels who happen to be in our network. So that's just a few examples, but I'm curious to hear from yourself how you envision the direction of this channel going.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting if there's ways to have subcategories within the channel. Right now, it's kind of a free for all, whatever's posted on there. I mean, there's a bit of a cadence. I think there's some folks like Birdnulls. I can expect a great newsletter from him every Tuesday. Brogan Law, Aaron Brogan puts something out there on Mondays. Capital Crypto's out there on Fridays with his newsletter. So it gives me something to kind of cycle through and keep things flowing. But you know, like McCall Wells hosted a great event in the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco yesterday that her law firm sponsored, and she pulled together. And so we pinned that as a cast of the channel, but we've had 12 happy hours in the channel. We probably have two more coming up in June. We had McCall's event yesterday, so events could be a nice category. Service providers like someone like Aaron Brogan, who has connected with clients on here. I'm no longer outside counsel, but when I was at the law firm, I found clients through Farcaster. Also, newsletters and job boards, any number of things. And so you wonder how these things can be configured. Additionally, like a lot of these happy hours, if not all of them, have been funded by the initial DGen airdrop, right? And if the channel had a wallet, and we could say, look, like maybe this is a multi-sig down the road. If this is a way that we can kind of show the value of this channel in the community. I'm not quite sure what that looks like, but yeah, there's any number of ways that can proceed. But right now, it's working quite well. But I could see a lot of different features that could be helpful down the road. So.
Maybe the subcategories is something that's a feature that we can have Kira later talk about.
Sure.
But Steve, I saw that when Ari talked about a channel wallet, it resonated with you. That I saw you nodding. Do you have any? Well, how do you feel about that? Do you have thoughts on that? Oop, I think you might be on mute or microphone malfunction.
Oh yeah, we can't hear you. Maybe while we wait for Steve. Steve, can you hear us? Can you try again? Can you speak into the mic? We heard a pop, by the way. I don't know if that was your microphone. Right before you unmuted. But while we wait for you to troubleshoot that, maybe Trish, you can add your 2 cents on the conversations in terms of how we can capture some of the value, I think is the question that Raz is asking, in channels, so that we can redistribute that in some way, whether it's directly on Farcaster through the same channels or outside of it, like Ari was saying, with these happy hours and other events that are happening, IRL.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh
Hi,
my God.
Trish.
I get to talk to Steve. I'm so excited. And you, Raz, Humpty, sorry. Everybody. I would love, I'm actually just here to hear, like, listen and learn, to be honest. Like, I think, I run the Gen X channel, and I took a break from Farcaster in the big boom when everybody got like thousands and thousands of followers. So that channel has been slow growing, which actually is like more my vibe. Um, it's just a small little group of people right now who kind of share the same aesthetic. If you like the music, if you like the aesthetic, you know, that kind of thing. So I've been hesitant to find ways to monetize it. I don't follow streaks because I feel like it's like book club, then it kind of ruins it for me. Does that make sense? So I would like to find ways to make it, I don't know, like bigger and more enjoyable. But right now I just really enjoy it. And with everything being like monetized in this space, I would really like to find ways to like monetize, but
Looks like
Oops.
we lost Res
We
too. We're
lost.
having some technical difficulties here. Steve
I'm
might
still
be going
here.
too. No, I know. Yeah, I think you and
Oh,
hi.
Ari are still here. There we go. We got you back.
I don't know what happened. Sorry about that.
And we
I
got
don't know
Steve
where I
back.
was. I just am like, I'm like the reluctant monetizer. I really do need to be better about monetizing in this space, but everything is so heavily monetized that I just kind of enjoy it, I just enjoy it. And then I have two other channels that are a little bit dormant because I didn't get that big following in the start. It was difficult to get traction. One is my name, just Trish, where I share art. The other one is extracurriculars for talking about things other than crypto, but Farcaster has gotten better at that, so it's less necessary. And then I have the other one, things devs say, where I make fun of like founders and BC, and I shouldn't have called it that. And I want to change the name so badly because I think I'm offending every working dev in the space, and AI is coming for them too. So I feel really bad, but I do a little shit talk over there. So,
We love a little shit talk. That's good. We need to keep it spicy, otherwise it just gets a little stale. And I mean, I don't know. I feel like people come back for conversations that are, trending, sure, but also for people who have an opinion about a given topic, and hopefully you have some expertise in what you're talking about. But being opinionated is not bad. Steve, looks like you're back too. I mean, did you want to add anything to that, or kind of answer the previous question? Up to you.
But I also know that Ari told us earlier that he might have to jump off soon. So I just want to get an opportunity to thank you again, Ari, for jumping on and nerd out about law and policy. And there's so much more to talk about, and hopefully we'll get a chance, at least offline.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Happy Friday.
Yeah, take care. Bye.
Bye. So sorry about that, Steve.
No, you're good. I learned the hard way that apparently once you join one of these Riverside rooms, you're kind of locked into your microphone of choice. And my setup has like 3 microphones, and it always picks the wrong one, which is like the MacBook microphone when the laptop's closed. So I end up sounding like a tin can if you could even hear me. So that's all been sorted out. I just unplugged and yeah. Um, Going to the original question on like wallet ownership, I think it's an interesting idea coordinating funds for like a almost semi-permissionlessly. It's kind of complicated. It's kind of skirting on the direction of like being a DAO, right? Like you're just kind of having people talk about some niche interest or topic. How do you put funds in there? Who manages it? I think it's interesting. I don't have any strong opinions about it. Honestly, it's just I've been very, very excited about, or I would say passionate, I'd say, about channels since they became permissionless. Yeah, back in like December 2023. I remember when like Dan or whoever like opened the floodgates. I was like, oh, this is crazy. Like I can now finally talk about any random thing I want on Farcaster, and it'll have its like appropriate audience or tag or whatever. And so I currently sit on like 12 channels that I like opened, and I probably only the only one actively like participate in is ADHD. I maybe there's some irony in there, but I think my opinions on channels and what they should be and can be has changed a lot in seeing the different iterations of them kind of come through. And I would say currently some of my favorite types of channels are actually the ones like the Trish's channel, Things Dev Say. Another one is Someone Build and Bad Takes. Like those 3 channels are probably like, in my opinion, the best form factor for like the timeline structure. I think channels are optimistically compared to subreddits a lot because it's like you're kind of sharing the same interest, but structurally they're like they're super different. Like subreddits are kind of like their own landing pages. It's like they have their own, uploading, hierarchies and sorting filters and things like that. It's way easier to navigate them. One thing that's overlooked a lot on the subreddit comparison is that Reddit in general has like fantastic SEO, search engine optimization. So that's how most people end up landing on these like super obscure topics in the first place. It's like you could even use Reddit as like a keyword on Google to almost like refine your results. Farcaster doesn't have anything close to that, and I don't think it ever will, truthfully, uh, only because of like the uh, disintegrating structure of like the casts, right? Like today you can cast something, and depending on how prolific of a caster you are, it might be gone in like 3 months because no one really even understands like the storage model for these things. So it's not a great place, I think, for evergreen content. That's kind of like its own problem. But going back to Things Dev Say, Someone Build, those are really fun, I think, because you can essentially take something you find on the feed or even buried in replies, and you quote cast it into a new channel, and you gave it basically a whole new life. It could either become like a joke. It's almost a call to action. Things Dev Say is like super funny because it's like, yeah, we're poking fun at people, and I think most people don't take themselves too seriously, and if they do, then well, they should let you know. But it's just fun. Like you can just someone will be innocuously commenting on like some gripe they have, and it's like something super obscure, like, and it's like, oh yeah, a dev would say that, and then I'll just find it, put it in Things Dev Say, and then boom, it's like an open joke, and I love that, I think uh, that should be leaned more in like the Farcaster ecosystem, because quote casting in itself is also a very powerful not behavior. We see a lot. That's how memes resurface. That's how we do a lot of things on Farcaster, and I think if we should lean more into that, in my opinion, as well as like the full permissionless model. I'm probably a little more opinionated on that, on who should be gatekeeping these topics, but that I don't want to start a tirade.
Let's
Unless you
do
guys
it.
want.
Let's do it. Start the tirade. Do
Pretty
it.
good.
Yeah.
I like
I,
how
I, I think I'm in
Steve
like the
came with the
minority.
match,
Oh,
Trish
sorry.
came with the gasoline, and it's
Do
like,
it.
okay, go,
Yeah.
go
You
for it.
know,
Share your
Mhm.
opinions.
I mean, I kind of think that we're all part of building something, even though it's not like ours. So I do care. I would love, but I think I'm in the minority on this. If channels were treated a little more like hashtags, so that I can cast out to the main feed, but when I put the channel in the cast, it falls into that channel. Because I feel the thing I don't like about channels is that I feel like I have to make a choice between visibility or putting it in the right category, and I like both, and I probably like categories a little more. I like categories, but that's one thing.
Well, I think that's something that's being discussed, right? Is what this kind of progressive evolution of channels will look like. And one of the concepts that is being put up there or proposed is that they are more like categories where there is an AI model that can, obviously learn over time, but at the beginning will be kind of selecting the buckets in which this commentary can go. So I agree with you. I think something that is frictionless, easy to use, I think is great. I think the other thing is this kind of optionality where you have one way of expressing that on Farcaster, and you have another way of expressing that if someone chooses to create a channel specific client, right? I think early on in the conversation, we talked about Cura and how they're channel maxis and they're kind of heading in this direction of like, we want to build with channels. And even Dan was saying, we acknowledge that like Cura's coming in and they want to do this and we want to help them as best we can to do that. And I did want to agree with you, Steve, in terms of your point of like Reddit as the front page of the internet, which I think that was their tagline for a very long time. They've done a really good job at surfacing conversations through SEO into Google where you can find these conversations on a Google search, which, maybe, yes, that will never happen on Farcaster, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen in some other client in the future. And that's kind of the beauty of like Farcaster as the protocol, where these things live, kind of permissionlessly on the protocol, and people can kind of build on this. And these conversations can be surfaced on the internet in different ways. So I think that that's a really interesting, two very distinct and very interesting points of views.
And to add to that, I think historically, just kind of what Trish was alluding to, historically, as someone choosing to cast something in a channel, you're really facing a dilemma of a distribution problem. That, oh, like, do I want to limit this to the people who really care about this topic, or do I want to try and reach people who don't know they care about this topic yet? And this is something that I'm kicking myself for not clarifying earlier when we had Dan on the line. But I think recently maybe there have been a change where the narrow casting has been expanded because I recently casted something about this, and someone said, "Oh, I never followed your channel. I just followed you, but you just showed up on my feed now." So I think if to be confirmed, but if that's the way right now that the front end is going, I think that would be. I think that would be really great. I mean, I not only do I want to be interested in the things that I already know I'm interested in. If I'm following Trish, I'm following Steve, I'm following Humpty and Graham, and I know they're smart people. I want to know what they care about too, right? So I don't want to just live in a vacuum of following what they talk about that I already know or that I already care about. I want to see pick up new interests and pick up new hobbies and pick up new thought processes through a more expansive broadcasting, albeit through some categorization with channels. So if anyone in the audience or you guys know where the current state of affairs is with narrowcasting, please let us know. But I think that would be a very exciting development, and that would address some of the issues that I think Trish was alluding to.
I wish I could emote on this app and send like a
Riverside is a very emotionless app. Yeah, put your thumbs up if you have on.
Well, Trish and Steve, thank you so much for your time. It's been really great having you. Oh, and actually, before I let you go, Steve, I think there was an anecdote about in the earlier days when warps was still a really big thing, and you had a story about just accidentally accruing warps. You want to drop us that before we part?
Yeah, essentially, front end was one of the first original channels, like before people were able to make them. Dan was looking for a moderator. I said, sure, I'll do it. And then at some point in the channels experiment, you had to pay to cast into a channel. And then this is right around when DGen was blowing up. And yeah, apparently a lot, and DGen and also the auto follow list thing. So front end just like blew up to like 80,000 followers. I really don't think that many people care about React or CSS. It's like, I know this is just like a stroke of luck. And yeah, people were just figuring things out. The channel had accrued about 70,000 warps. So it was about like $700 worth of, USDC or whatever. But no, it was less. It was like closer to six, or I don't know. But then yeah, there were three other moderators: Daryl Yao, Pugsin, and Type of. All great developers I respect, and we all have our opinions on frameworks. And yeah, I was just like, guys, I don't know what to do with $600 worth of warps. I'm gonna figure out one day how to send it all to you. And then a couple months ago, Warps, on its way out, they're just I cashed it all in, sent them their shares, and that was it. We just made money because people didn't know they wanted to talk about front end so badly. And yeah, it's one of those weird things where just like you're at the right place at the right time, and just money shows up. It felt I just yeah, that was it.
Well, you have to be prepared to be lucky. So, if anyone in the audience doesn't have a channel yet and want to be primed for these serendipities, you know where to find us.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Trish. Appreciate your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Happy
having me.
Friday.
Happy Friday.
Cool. And we're continuing with McBain or Graham. It's so weird to see Graham as your name up here. I only know you as McBain.
Yeah, McBain's a better name, so we could go with that. I wonder if I can change it and still be a present and valuable guest. But
Yep.
yeah, thanks for doing this. This is fun. I'm a big channel maxi, so love it.
Tell us about that. You have a very successful channel, parenting among others, perhaps. But I am myself not a parent, but it's nice to pop in and out, and sometimes just seeing parenting stuff because I followed the channel on my feed and I gained some empathy from other the struggles of other parents and just watching them commiserate. So. Yeah.
I mean, it's not all commiseration. I think there's also some like joy sharing and
Yes.
yeah, I mean the other major channel. So similar to Steve, my parenting was a pre-creation channel, and I took it over because I'm just a human Labrador and like to sort of share kind things. So I got to take over the parenting channel. But it's super fun for me. I'm like a wholesome. I've very much embraced my like suburban dad life, and so I really enjoy the intersection of crypto people and parents because I know a lot of parents, but none of them care about crypto, and so to have those two things intersect is a really fun space for me to be in. I also the NHL playoffs are happening right now, and my team, the Oilers, are in, and so the hockey channel is another great place. So shout out the hockey team or the hockey channel. So yeah, it's just been for me. I think I love the idea of like making your first dollar on the internet. I have yet to make a dollar from either of these channels because I haven't really tried, but and I think a good way to do that is to like create a niche community. Like I grew up on the internet when internet like BBS forums were the thing, and this feels like the next generation of a BBS forum in the sense that like you can create a social network about any niche you want and monetize it in any way that you want, and you don't have to do anything. You just like say this is the place now, and then you just have to bring people to it. So, and then all the cool moderation tools that are getting built, and all the different iteration that's happened in terms of like channels, the tools for channel owners, I think are really inspiring. So, I'm just like really bullish on Farcaster in general and channels as an opportunity for people to, make their first internet dollar.
Maybe we lost Raz. So I mean, it's one of the ones that what's it called? What's his name? DWR, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that Dan said when he first came up here was the kind of initial set of channels that kind of first came into the space and how they were being used. One of the ones that they first created was Farcon. I think for me, and maybe many people on Farcaster recognize you as one of the faces of Farcon in LA. Can you maybe talk a little bit about like the role that channels played during Farcon in LA? Was it kind of a gathering point for conversations about Farcon? Was it your way of like first testing the idea of bringing Farcon to life? As other people have said here, they test the product, they build a community, and then they go out and build it after people have joined the channel.
I think, well, sort of two questions. How did the channel play into the event? I think Ted and I are both like, unapologetically enthusiastic Farcaster people. And so we got really excited about channels. Like they were sort of blowing up as Farcon LA was happening. And so we really leaned into them for the planning of the event. Like we went to the design channel and said, "Hey, we need designers." And we went to the, like sports channel, or I think it was the beach channel, and that's where somebody organized the like beach event that ended up not happening. But like the NFT channel. So almost everything that we wanted to have happen in the event, we reached out to that channel first, or the leaders of those channels first, and asked them to sort of take it on. And originally the concept for the event was to have like just a keynote from Dan and Varun, and then all side channel events where like the channel owners would be in charge of going and doing their different thing. And then it sort of got away from us. But yeah, I mean, it was really instrumental, and having a core place for people to post. Twitter has its idea of teapot, like this part of Twitter, but Farcaster has sort of codified that with channels, which I think is a really cool idea. And then the second question was sort of like people can bootstrap an idea and then turn it into a business later. I think that the shape of that is correct, right? Like first time founders worry about product, second time founders worry about distribution. And so that really lines well with a channel, because it's just distribution, and then you can worry about the product. And so like I have many a time sort of noodled on how I might turn parenting into a business. We did one experiment where Will from Splits was having a baby, and so we raised a bunch of money. And instead, it was like a baby train. Like we can't all go cook him food for when their baby came, and so instead we raised like $300 and bought them. Bought his wife a $300 gift card to DoorDash so that they could still get her favorite dinner from someplace, even though they couldn't leave the house. And so like that's not really a business, but it's a cool way to organize and share stuff. One thing I really wanted to do is in Scandinavia, they do this like baby boxes. So as soon as a baby is born, the government will send you a cardboard box that is filled with everything you need for the first 3 months of life, and it doubles as a bassinet. So you don't have to like buy all this stuff. You just get a box of everything you need. And I thought that would be really fun to like have the parenting channel. If you're a parent and you're expecting, you can just raise your hand and the parenting channel will send you that box. And it would be the cool, like ultimate gift from the ultimate parenting community. So I'll let it sort of take its own shape. It's, for me, it's just a fun, organic place to vent when my kids are being brats. And other than that, it's fun to hear other stories from other people.
I can't imagine your kid being a brat. At least the one that I met was an angel, and so such a big part of Farcon in LA? I know you laugh, but like he was a celebrity because he was very helpful and friendly with everybody.
He's great. He's and it's, uh, having a very outgoing kid is great at events. But like when I was on a call with the HR department earlier, and he walked up and made a sign that said, "Can we plant pitcher plants? Hashtag gardening," to like ask me a question, and I was like, "Yes, but like." None of this needs to be asked right now, so it's a blessing and a curse.
That's awesome. And by the way, I do want to kind of go back and double click on what you said about like Farcon LA and channels. Now that I'm recalling, I do remember that the events list of the programming was by channels. It was
Yeah.
like / hired, and they had an event outside in the skate yard where
Mm-hmm.
people congregated. And then yeah, I think there was like one by Cooper for music.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that you're right, and that's a really interesting way of trying to organize an event around communities that are already bootstrapped on Farcaster. So cool.
Yeah, that was the goal. So yeah, it worked out to some degree. So it was definitely fun. I think channels are just a fun experiment, and they're a fun medium to try to build communities. So yeah, I love this channels day is a fun concept. But yeah, what's the most interesting thing somebody's said about channels today? Was it Dan? Was it Ted? Who's nailed
Rez, you
it so
go
far?
first.
I think for me it was exciting to hear Dan speak about channels with such enthusiasm again, and really engaging the community. We learned today, I guess through the stream that there have been DMs that the Merkle team is a part of, really engaging community members who are passionate about channels to actually collaborate in finding something that would work both maybe for the Farcaster client itself, and then on the protocol level, like how do we open up this world so that other people can innovate on it, and maybe removing some roadblocks. So even though if something isn't directly aligned with the Farcaster main client, that we can kind of see this world flourish. That is something that I'm excited about, because I think we all know as of maybe even just a week or two ago that the direction of channels was unclear. We knew they were still around, and the passionate users are still there, but it's nice to hear that everyone seems motivated to see how it can work.
Yeah, no, I'm always I've always been a big believer that this is the right shape of a standard for the network, and so I'm excited to see where it goes.
I'm curious, you mentioned earlier about how, at least initially with the parenting channel, a lot of the users were also, crypto adjacent, for obvious reasons. I think the people who were already on Farcaster tended to be crypto adjacent. Have you seen, as time goes on and as the platform evolves, do you see more and more members who maybe aren't really, maybe their first nexus or their main nexus to Farcaster isn't really crypto, but they've kind of hooked onto the other more community aspects that are more resonant IRL?
Yeah, I think I've seen a few people that join and spend a lot of time in the parenting channel, and I think it's definitely going to be the pattern moving forward. I've said for a long time that I would not be surprised if a single channel outstripped the growth of Farcaster, at least for a little while, because somebody just did it right. Because joining a social network is so hard, and it's so like can seem so daunting. And so having this little piece carved out just for you, I think is easier. It feels like more tackleable to like get a name for yourself in the parenting channel or in the hockey channel than it is in Farcaster in general. And when people join like Twitter, they're trying to find Teapot, that part of Twitter that they're interested in. But they don't know. They're just they're tweeting into the void at that point. And so at least having some direction of where you're posting to, I think is a great idea.
You are preaching to the choir here. Well, McBain, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really great
Yeah.
hearing from you, and I feel like we haven't really connected since FarCon last year. So it's really great hearing from you and seeing you so active in this space.
Yeah. Well, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me all. Bye, Cameron. Or hi, Cameron. Bye, Cameron. Yeah. We'll see you all later.
Happy Friday.
Bye.
Thanks for being.
What's up,
Hey,
y'all?
Cameron, GM.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Apologies for popping in a little early. Wasn't sure if there was like a bullpen for the studio.
Not at all. No, it's been working out great. You know, it's kind of spontaneous. People have been popping in and out, and you know, as they come and go, there are some opportunities for some serendipitous conversations too. So,
Nice.
yeah. Yeah. So Cameron, thank you again. Tell us about so one of the channels that I follow that you're active in is OK Banger.
Yep.
But you've also you know, you also have the Cameron channel, which I follow. You know, we've been longtime Farcaster users, but I want to, you know, and we've both, I think all three of us have been on Farcaster since the before times.
Yep.
And we'd love to hear how channels have changed how you interact with the space, your community, all of that.
Yeah, so I kind of went a little channel crazy at the start. I actually I don't know if you came across this in your channel day research, but I wrote an essay about channels when they talked about them. And I'll drop it. I don't know. Yeah, there's a chat here. Let me pull it up. But basically the gist of the essay is that the internet is missing what I was hoping channels would fill the void of. And so basically what I think channels, ooh, can I drop anything in here? I don't know if I can drop anything, but I'll send it to you on Farcaster after. But it's basically like you have you have like a problem with the internet right now where you need global scale distribution to be like relatively as successful as like anything that goes viral on these other platforms. But when you have kind of global distribution by default, you're filtering for very specific types of content. And when you're filtering for very specific types of content, you're effectively shaping whatever the ultimate like big conversation happens on any platform. And so what I mean by that specifically is I think it's Packy McCormick that coined the term like fortune cookie tweets, where if you hit some level of success on Twitter and you want to like continue to grow that, your ideas kind of have to get dumber and dumber in order to appeal to more and more people until eventually you're not really saying anything at all because a bland fortune cookie like, you know, you will have good fortune today, like by definition is the most accessible thing that you can do because it's not really saying anything. And as a result, a bunch of people can interpret what they want from it. And then you just like end up diluting your ideas at the expense of distribution. The value of what I was hoping channels would become and still can become is that it's a space that has a bit of the global distribution thing in that like the stuff that goes in channels can hit the overall algo feed that is going to be like the main feed for whatever app feed, like connects with casts and channels. But it's like a siloed space where one, not everybody can participate all the time because not everybody's a good participant in every discussion. And two, it's a little bit removed so you can develop ideas a little bit more deeply, maybe more thoughtfully, and get at some stuff that's harder to talk about when the conversation is global by default. And so the essay I put together was like, oh, channels very neatly solve this like tension between you want global distribution, but you also need a place to develop ideas. And so that's why I went channel crazy at the start. I think I own like 8 or 9 channels. I do not actively moderate any of those other than the Cameron channel and OK Banger. But you know, happy to talk about any of those.
I think you're in good company here when it comes to many channels. So yeah, I mean, I think I definitely remember having read your early article, and I would love to revisit that after the stream and just to see how things have evolved and where things have changed. But it really resonated with me that having a space where people can just, whatever topic it is, but if people who really care about this, they know something intimately about something, and they want to be around other people who are kind of talking about that at the same level. Channels afford them that opportunity. Whereas, on that distribution issue, especially when we add in monetization natively, right? The more distribution you get, the more engagement you get. Like now, there is an opportunity cost to it, right? You can sacrifice talking about something in depth and like risking that a lot of people either don't care about the topic or they don't know enough to meaningfully engage with you on that. And if you want to make money on the platform, maybe you would then be incentivized just not to go deep, as you were alluding to, and you start seeing a little bit of relying strictly on just content on main. You might see a little bit of a race to the bottom, right? From a subject matter engagement level. So I think that observation is very astute, and I think we're that's why we love channels, and that's why we're celebrating channels, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely, I do wish that there was a little bit more incentive to like exist in channels today. But I guess like a pretty reasonable counter argument is that everywhere where there's like a deep niche, I'll say like nerd community on the internet, those didn't start with an incentive other than to just like talk about whatever thing that the group of people was really passionate about. So I do think that the channel's infrastructure does lend itself to being that place once people kind of realize it, and then maybe get past kind of like the initial uh-oh feeling of I don't like crypto, maybe reflexively that a lot of places on the internet feel.
Yeah. So, I mean, just because you've thought so deeply about the issue, maybe it's just a thought experiment here, but is there, can you think of a way where maybe the current monetization through rewards, tipping is maybe one mechanism, but through maybe native Farcaster support that the distribution of those rewards could be maybe reimagined in a way that would incentivize some of these more in-depth conversations.
So I think broadly what the Farcaster team has done with rewards, and they've like extended this through Farcaster Pro and making that be like part of protocol potentially rewards. I think what they're doing is broadly doing what they said it was going to do, which is you have this definition of good content being what people on the platform engage with. Like, you and I don't get to decide what's good content. Like, we might have opinions about it. We might say like, oh, this is, higher quality than this thing. But at the end of the day, the beautiful thing about the internet is people get to decide what is good. And so Farcaster's taken that definition and run with it. Some weeks that's kind of like the walk and talk video meta. Some weeks that's, Bert the dog, posting as the dog, and other weeks like a while ago it was Afro Chicks like talking about her exercise. And so like it's doing a good job of highlighting kind of a rotating amount of like good content, because the next layer that they have in there is basically an anti-spam or anti-manipulation layer of a bunch of people coordinating to fake make certain counts pop. I don't think you can do that at the protocol level yet. But so what I would say as a way to incentivize channels, I think they could have like a parallel smaller version of creator rewards that are specifically about channel posts. And like, it's hard, but ostensibly like these channels are a place where the people in them are promoting things that are related to the channel, but just highlighting like not just the person who made the best content, but the best post itself in food gets $5 over the week. Like, they pick a couple core channels, and we know kind of like what channels that are universal across the internet are. You can just kind of look at subreddits to figure out like what people genuinely have cared about over decades and decades of interacting on the internet. You pick 10, 20, we'll say like critical channels for Farcaster getting out of its own bubble, and like $5 to whoever has the best post in any of those channels, just as a way to start the flywheel of changing people's brains of, oh, posting in channels has a point. Because like right now, I think a lot of people don't feel like it has a point.
Yeah, and I think even, I've also thought about something like that, right? Like, oh, if we didn't do it just, the full protocol and assigning rewards that way, is there a universe where, kind of like what you were saying, some of the rewards, the funds are allocated to specific channels, and maybe the distribution mechanism. I didn't really think through that. Maybe it's the community of determining how the money goes on a use it or lose it basis, but maybe even just something that's without specifically earmarking the money. Maybe if we could incorporate a little bit more of channel participation into the ranking itself, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
like maybe you get a boost if you are the top three or whatever number it is contributor in your channel, so that there is a way for the platform to recognize people who are spending a lot of time thinking about some of these esoteric maybe topics, and that won't compete with on main in a million years, but these are really, really important things that add so much the intellectual texture to the bigger platform that differentiates what Farcaster is from other platforms, right? Because if it's just if it's just main, well, for a while, I imagine Twitter has a better main, maybe, right? So
Better is doing a lot of lifting, but
controversial.
like for like a global scale interaction, I would say yeah, for sure. Like all of the Elon Trump stuff yesterday was on Twitter, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's something to think about, and I hope that makes it into the conversation. Are you actively part of the kind of Farcaster channel direction conversations as well?
I not any more than anybody
Y-
else.
Yeah.
I do think, I'm not like a Merkel Farcaster team apologist. I've been on Farcaster for a long time, and so I've publicly supported them and publicly criticized them, depending on what the current thing was, in my opinion on it. What I will say is I do think Dan does a really, really good job of reaching out to people that have consistently shown that they care, and are able to like talk about it in a way that's like respectful and non-reactionary. Obviously, that means some people, especially new people to the platform that want to hear their opinions or want to see that their opinions are being heard, feel like they're getting paid less attention to, and like arguably they should be because they just got here and they don't really understand the history of the place. That doesn't mean if they stick around for the next year that their opinion should still not be as listened to. But so like to the extent Dan is doing the DMing and being like I got a DM when they were about to launch Farcaster Pro, and like I'm not saying I was the one who came up with this because I'm sure a bunch of other people said this in the DM, but one of my immediate responses to their initial version for Farcaster Pro subscription was, if you make this in any way related to the algorithm and success in the algorithm, people are going to lose their minds because it immediately becomes like, okay, Farcaster Pro is pay to play for Farcaster. And ultimately, the template that I received in my initial DM, like, a couple days later when they finally launched it, it didn't include that part of it. And I think other people probably messaged that too. And so I think that kind of the stuff we're talking about will be listened to. So I'm kind of hopeful in that respect.
That's very promising. um, tell us about OK Banger
Yeah.
for the audience who doesn't know.
Yeah, OK Banger is Kristen and I's weekly, mostly show. It's evolved over the past 6 months, but now we center every week's discussion around an important topic that's embodied by a book or an essay or like a piece of media that we think does a good job talking about whatever we want to talk about. So a couple weeks ago, we did a show on anti-memes, and we used the book "There Is No Anti-Memetics Division," which is a pretty popular sci-fi book, at least in like the Twitter sphere part of the internet. And we talked about memeticism, what like makes a meme versus an anti-meme, and how you can think about that as you're operating on the internet, and like why thinking about using these things when you're like making stuff as a creator or whatever is probably a good thing. Honestly, partially because it contributes to this way to make spaces where not everybody is trying to weigh in on a conversation because they haven't done the requisite work to participate in that conversation. So OK Bangers, our weekly show every Tuesday at 11 Eastern time, 8 a.m. Pacific.
Okay, so and I understand the term "OK Banger" to be a Farcaster meme itself.
Yes.
Would you say "OK Banger" is a Farcaster native podcast? Is that fair to say?
So yes, asterisk. We don't spend a ton of time talking about Farcaster specific things because we want the show to be accessible to people that haven't discovered Farcaster yet. But by nature of most of our audience being on Farcaster and using it every day, we talk about stuff that's very important to Farcasters. And so OK Banger was a meme that emerged like about a year plus ago. We're trying to come up with different names for the show, and we knew we wanted to talk about really important, like really good ideas, because that's what Christian and I just like to do when we're not on camera as well. And so OK Banger was our way of nodding to the platform that we met on and kind of like developed our professional interactions. And also, it's like really fun to be able to be like, okay, every time somebody says something good, it's like, OK Banger, that was like a great point that you made.
Yeah, so I see Anshul is here, but one more thing that I wanted to ask you to kind of tie it back all into Dan's conversation earlier about maybe aligning channels' interests with Farcaster's growth interests. So you have this podcast. It's kind of born out of a Farcaster meme, but the topic isn't really confined at all to anything crypto or Farcaster related even.
Exactly.
So and I know, and maybe it's really just because that's how I came to know about the podcast, but I know about OK Banger as a podcast because of the OK Banger channel. And
Yeah.
so how do you see yourselves growing, expanding in this, maybe more like podcast space, maybe with your channel by growing your user base outside of Farcaster?
Yeah, so we started a Discord because channels don't have all the things that we would want to have in terms of developing like a homegrown community. The second, Farcaster reprioritizes channels and starts developing features that make a little bit more sense, both in terms of distribution and like community quality of life things. We plan on funneling people towards the OK Banger channel on Farcaster. But as y'all know, it's hard to get anybody to pay attention to anything, and so we're trying to solve that problem before we start trying to move people around the internet.
Yeah. Well, we're supporters here of OK Banger, and obviously you, Cameron, and Kristen is a great friend. So, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about channels, and we're very excited to see where your endeavors are going.
Appreciate it. Good to see y'all, and good to see you too, Zinger. Y'all have a good day.
Oh, yeah, and if you send us a link to your article earlier, we'll make sure that we amplify that also so people can kind of follow along the thought process.
Awesome. I'll send that right after this. Bye, y'all.
Cool. Bye. Happy Friday. All right, we have a stack again. Zinger, Anshul, it's good to see you.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for jumping on. I know you have a busy day today.
Of course.
So Anshul is from Kira, and we'd love to hear more about after having had all these conversations about channels, how Kira is thinking about their approach. But before going general, more specifically, Zinger would love to hear about your experience with channels, how you have managed to organize maybe your coastal EDM listening contingency here on Farcaster.
Sure. Yeah, so I think like I played around with channels like pretty early on. I started hosting the New York channel. That was kind of my first foray into it. And that one was like one of the OG channels. There were already like a bunch of people in there, so just kind of tried to keep like the energy up around that. I think like location channels can be tricky, just especially New York is like the largest user base at the moment. So um, it's just like it can be very broad sometimes. And so I wanted to kind of just experiment with something like super like niche and narrow, which is just like I love house and like techno music, and figured maybe other people would, or I would like to kind of like share more about that. And so I started this channel called Uns Uns. That's basically all about that. So like posting like shows that I'm going to that I'm excited about, that I've clips that I like, songs that I like, and yeah, just started sharing. And I think like it's still a pretty small channel, and I would say there's probably like maybe like a dozen or so active people in it, including like Zach, who co-hosts it with me. And I think like even though it's small, it's been cool to have like that little niche on the internet, and I've definitely like made friends or like deeper connections with that dozen or so people that are like more active in it. And then more recently, during Farcon in New York, we were able to like organize a couple of like IRL events, actually like getting people to go out to a couple of shows over the Farcon weekend. And that was like a lot of fun because I think for a lot of people it was their first show or like first foray into house music. And so even if they weren't um, even if they weren't like really active in the channel or even members of the channel before, I think now they've been like almost like inducted into the Incense cult, and they're like more interested now. So it's cool to see that, and I'm hoping to have that like feedback loop continue and like scale over time.
Can you talk about culture as a way of connecting communities on Farcaster? Because I think Unsense is a good example of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think house music has like this very specific culture, and so I think being able to kind of like post about that and share it in like in this open channel where like others can kind of like peek in, and I think that they've iterated a lot on like the channel model over time in terms of like only people who are in the channel see the cast, or anybody who's following you, can they see your cast in a channel that they don't follow. And so like I think the fact that it's like open and visible at the moment is cool because I think I post a lot of like house music stuff, and so do other active members of the channel, and it's like interesting to like share those bits of culture, and they kind of like leach out onto other like parts of like the broader Farcaster community. And then I think people are like curious, or maybe they hear a song for the first time that they hadn't heard, and they're like, "That's cool." And then I think like reinforcing the culture is really like these IRL events. So like I think, as I was mentioning, over the Farcon weekend, um, there were a bunch of people who went to their first show, and I remember like specifically a couple of people like came up to me like during the show, and they were just like, "I get it now. Like this is like so cool," and that was like really cool to see because I remember when I had that moment myself, and I think it is like a really cool community, and it's like I think it's like helped a lot of people, myself included, like get through a lot in their lives and just like feel more like fulfilled. There's just like a lot of cool things about the house community. I think people like come together a lot. There's a lot of good stories, so I'm hoping to get more of that onto Farcaster. I think like there's definitely still, like Unsense is so tiny comparatively, but the culture is huge, and so like I would love to get more parts of that onto Farcaster. I know it exists like on Reddit. There's like Telegram groups on Twitter. There's like a pretty big community, and so like Twitter is kind of the big one on my mind now. I would love to onboard some of those people onto Farcaster. 'Cause I just think there's so many cool things you can do once like a community starts to get built on Farcaster with regards to like even like specific like mini apps that you want to build that like might just cater to that small audience. It's like now possible because you have this like same social graph to play with. So yeah, I think the culture is a huge piece of it, and like I'm excited to both have more people who are in the culture get onto Farcaster, and then also get more people who are on Farcaster into the culture.
I think there's a lot of threads that we've been discovering and pulling on throughout. I mean, almost 3 hours. Gosh, this is definitely the longest space I've hosted about Farcaster. So it's been pretty interesting to see the excitement, firstly, about Farcaster channels. So the one of the threads that I did find, and you kind of also touched on it, is this idea of like connecting the URL with the IRL, and how culture was a big way of like connecting the dots there, where people either discovered uns or house music through this channel, and then they were able to kind of explore this same experience, but in a physical format when they came together in New York. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how you would organize this same kind of or drive the culture to Farcaster if channels didn't exist, or if it changed, in the way that we currently know them.
Yeah, I think it would be tough. I mean, like even as I was mentioning earlier, there is this group of it's called like burner Twitter for the most part, and it's kind of like it's I think I don't know if it's a reference to Burning Man or just like burner accounts, but it's like there are kind of these like house music accounts. They're usually like spoof names of like famous DJs. Like there's this one guy called John Summit instead of John Summit, and like a bunch of other ones. And so they are like kind of like meme accounts, but then like I have specifically been seeing a lot more of them on my like algorithm on there, and I think like it's because I followed some of them, but still there's no place for like a few weeks ago I went to a show and I posted about it on Farcaster and I also posted about it on Twitter. On Farcaster I could just go ahead and post that in the channel and I knew that kind of like the relevant people would see it. On Twitter, I tweeted it out, and it's like unless you're going for something like super high engagement, whatever, like a lot of people don't see it, and more importantly, like, even some if some people do see it, it's like doubtful that it's going to be the right people who actually like care or would be interested in that content. And so I know they're trying to improve that too, obviously, but I think just having this like uh, I always refer to channels as like this like kind of bounding box. Having that is like really powerful because I think then it's like you're able to just like project what you want to into like a specific space versus like putting it out there and hoping that the algo shows it to the right people. And it also allows you to kind of like meet more of those people. So like on Twitter, it's like I just randomly find them and then I'll follow and see who they're commenting on and try to like find it that way. But I think like it's nice to be able to like show up to a channel and be like, oh, here's all the people here, and like you can kind of look around. It's like you feel like you're showing up to a house party and kind of like, okay, here's the different people here. I can get to know them over time. It's like this revolving cast of characters. Versus on Twitter, it's like it's much harder, I think, to build that.
Yeah, and again, I just want to give a nod to Rez, who during our first coffee meet when we were conceiving this event, she spoke of the ability to not just talk broadly about topics, but to talk deeply about them and how channels is a facilitator of that. And I think that this is a, Unsense is a perfect example. It's more of a culture driven community. It isn't talking about technology, it isn't talking about a product, it's talking about a feeling, a vibe that's driven by the music, right? And the people that care about this music. So yeah, I appreciate you kind of like reinforcing that.
I think one thing I just want to say on that, that's like a great point about the deep and just like the nicheness of it. I think that allows you to like really, yeah, go deep into the culture without feeling like, oh, like this is like such a niche post. Like I've posted stuff in the Unsen channel that is like for such a niche audience, whether it's like an inside joke or not even an inside joke, but it's like something that happened that you really would have to be like plugged into the scene to even understand what I was talking about. And I feel so much more comfortable posting that on Farcaster than I do because of channels than I do on Twitter because if I post it, it's just like people are gonna be like, "What is this guy talking about?" But in Unsuns, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna make any obscure niche reference that I want because like I know that somebody will probably get it. And a lot of times like that's been Zach because like I think the two of us are the most active in there, which makes sense because we're hosting it. But like other people like it'll just like I'll get a reply sometimes and I'm like surprised that people even can pick up on the reference. But I'm hoping to like really be able to grow that more because it feels great. It feels great when you can reference something really niche within some subculture that you're in, and other people get it, and you can actually like engage with them.
I think too with house music and techno, just based on the origin of the genres, right? Like they came from the underground, like in LA, in New York, I'm sure too, in Brooklyn, you want to see a lot of like really good music. Sometimes, they're in some sketchy warehouses, right? The whole culture is kind of built around this idea of being counterculture, being around not being the mainstream. I mean, house music, especially tech house, has gone really popular now, but like the kind of the ethos of it is like no cameras, right? And that is not really conducive normally to a feed on main, right? Like that's for the the Taylor Swift and the John Mayers of the like, right? Like they're the radio hits. Whereas like if you want to really like get deep and like you want to see who are the other people who on a Saturday night 4 a.m. would be out at a warehouse. That's where you go. You go to Unsense, right? So I think there's a really interesting interaction, just like on a bigger, more macro level, how cultures interact that I think is mapping very nicely through channels on Farcaster. And I'm really excited that we have this space through the hard work of you and Zach.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, I think, to continue to build the community. And yeah, what you said is like spot on. It is very like underground culture, but it's also like it's underground and kind of like niche in this way, but it's also like super welcoming, which is really one of my absolute favorite things about it. Even these people that I took to the show during FarCon, it's like it was their first show, and you just immediately can tell like people just have good vibes at the show. Everyone's just like really friendly, great vibes. There's not like people like fighting or trying to push to the front. Of course, there's some people like that, but like generally, I think they get shunned by the community because it's like very much this like sacred space of like, hey, it's like a really welcoming community. Show up as you are. It's not like some sceney club. Like literally, it's a warehouse. Wear whatever you want. Some people look like they're coming from a Halloween parade. Other people are, dressed to the nines, and it just doesn't matter. Like people are just enjoying themselves and vibing, and feeling the music. And so I'm hoping to both continue that, IRL, and also like get some of that culture onto Farcaster, and yeah, like I said, get more people on Farcaster into the culture, get more people who are in the culture onto Farcaster. That's kind of like my mentality with Unsense.
Very cool. Well, Zinger, thank you so much for giving us your time today. It's really great to hear more about the story behind Unsense. And if anyone here listening doesn't follow that channel and you are interested in learning more about house and techno, you know where to go.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. This is awesome that you guys are doing this, and enjoy the. I'll keep watching the rest of the show. Enjoy.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Happy Friday.
All
Thank
right,
you so
have a good
much.
weekend. Bye.
All right. And last but certainly not least,
I think
Anshul,
this is
it's really nice.
ideal that Anshul
Yeah.
is last to talk about Kira. And I kind of was hoping Zinker would stick around because I wanted to hear his thoughts about like what Kira is building. Because this is like, I mean, even Dan mentioned it. They are the channel maxis. They are the ones that are like building a product on channels on so decentralizing them, as Dan was saying at the very beginning of this live stream, is very much important to all of us because Kira is building a product to service people like Zinger with Uns Uns who can't find another way to build these conversations deeply, and not just broadly through channels. So GM Anshal, give us a short intro because you're the final one here. So take all the time you want until
Yes,
we get kicked out.
yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation. I know Sahil was going to be here, but he had a personal conflict, so unfortunately he couldn't make it. But you'll get what you get from me. So yeah, I think for me, I'm working with Cura, but I think I am really passionate about communities, especially after I've had the opportunity to talk to so many channel mods and community builders and entrepreneurs on Farcaster and even outside of Farcaster, honestly, through Farcon and ETH Denver, calls, DMs. And one thing I've understood is running a channel, it's deeply personal. You can't just do it because you want to make a business out of it. It has to be personal. It has to be something you're passionate about. And unfortunately, right now, it's an unpaid labor job. That's what it is. So I think some of the strongest communities and bonds that are formed on Farcaster truly come from that passion, and I love to support that and see that. And at Cura, really, that's what we're trying to do, right? Bring that channel and community experience to people and make it more rewarding, not just for channel mods, but also the actual community. Make it more rewarding for them, whether that's actually mods being able to reward their members, whether that's through leaderboards, whether that's through high signal content, just so that they don't get lost in the noise. I think that's what Cura is trying to bring.
That's really fascinating. And Anshul, I know you and I connected for the first time yesterday, and I was very inspired by what Kira is working on right now. Did you have a chance to catch when Dan was on this morning?
Yes,
Or
yes.
throughout, yeah, was there anything throughout today's? We've heard from also many other channel owners who've brought really great insights on, from a user perspective, how they engage with channels. Was there anything that really stuck out to you as something that's aligned with Kira or something that you guys haven't thought about and would like to think about now, getting some community response?
That's a great question, Rez. Yeah, I was happy to connect with you yesterday. I think the first thing about Dan, and I think I understand where that tension comes from Merkel, and they have to stay lean and focus on their growth and new user acquisition. But I think that's where the real embracing of that bifurcation comes, right? Keeping channels and communities discoverable in the ecosystem and on the core app, whether that be on Coinbase Wallet, whether that's on Farcaster, but then allowing the power tools and all of those additional moderation tools, curation bits on clients like Cura and maybe others that would come up. I don't know. So I think that's what I would kind of want to speak to for Dan's point. But what I have been hearing from other mods, and I really love that I got to hear most of them, especially I think Ari also pointed that out for law and policy, was being able to surface new users and actually pin content and notify people about content. I think what happens is because people are just constantly posting in channels and casting in channels, sometimes the good content gets lost. I think with Cura, we're trying to give them the power to be able to curate content. So give shout out to people in your channel for, and they can be multiple casts. They don't have to be just one pin post. And you can manually notify your followers and your members that, hey, look, Humpty, Rez, Anshul, they've done this week. It's so cool. Go check it out. And that's the curated bit. And the other bit is actually finding high signal content through the hot and top feed, where you actually see what your community is engaging with, what are they really vibing with? Is it, and if it is not true to the channel rules, then maybe that's what the community wants and that's what you're seeing. So I think it's a good way to surface and discover what really your community is about. And that's what I got from most of the mods today, that they want to be able to surface good content. And just to add to that also, right, the one thing in my conversation with mods has also been they want to be able to give back to their community. A lot of them use hyper sub, right? So people pay even just as little as $1 to join the channel, but then they want to reward the community in some way. If that's tokens or that's USDC, or even if that's just through a rounds, whatever that might be, Cura wants to be able to give them the ability to do that to the true contributors, which you can see through channel leaderboards, because the channel leaderboard it's very transparent. It's based on what your community is engaging with, reputed users in your community are engaging with, and they surface on the channel leaderboard. So you know who the true contributors are and the top contributors are. But that's a lot of me talking, so I'll pause.
No, I think that's great. I think one thing you just mentioned here is the fact that you have a lot of conversations with channel entrepreneurs, which, by the way, that is very much a Sahil thing. And Dan was using that, which I was like, small wins for the small wins. Because I know Sahil, when we first started talking about channels last year, and Kira kind of building on top of them, he basically is like, I see channel owners as entrepreneurs. They're building, a business on Farcaster through channels. And for me personally, that's something that has really felt like it, it hasn't never felt more real than today. Because whether they were building a media product like GM Farcaster or OK Banger, or they were building a client or a product like Uno, right, or a culture tribe like Uns, it just feels like everyone agrees that they have a business here on Farcaster, and they're testing out this business through channels, right? And then they're able to explore what else they can do on, with this community or with this business once they have their core audience that they've discovered through channels. So I really would love to hear from you and the conversations that you've had with these channel entrepreneurs. What else are you hearing in terms of like what their desire is to build more deeply on Farcaster through channels?
That's a great question, Hamdi. And I just want to give Hamdi a shout out. He was one of the first channel entrepreneurs I spoke to. He has helped, I think, build a lot of the tools and the ideas with Cura, and he's been a great contributor. So thank you, Hamdi. We really appreciate it. But going to your question on what am I hearing more from channel mods, I think they want the ability. So there are a couple of things other than the curation bit, right? They also want the ability to know what is it that their community is vibing with. Sometimes it just feels like you're posting and casting in the void, and you don't want to be the dictator of this community. You kind of want to build with them, and you want to build that culture more deeply. For that, I think kind of giving them the metrics and the analytics to know who's responding to what, more than just knowing who's liking your stuff. It's really what are they engaging with, what are they looking at, Are they casting enough? Like those kind of things, just providing them that value to know how their community can grow. Because hey, if they don't like certain kind of content, you know that's not the way to go, and you kind of have to shift. So I think that's what I'm hearing from them. The other bit that I'm hearing from them is being able to kind of, nobody likes spam, but you also kind of don't want to just put a spam label on everybody. So I think one core aspect of Cura, and I love that about what we do at Cura, and I hope that everyone in the community does that. Just because, say, I am spam in Farcaster or have really less followers, or I just joined yesterday, but I'm very passionate about New York, I should be able to post my thoughts in there without being like an overarching spam label everywhere. And I think Cura allows that, that if I am spam in Humpty's channel, does not mean I'm spam everywhere else. Of course, giving the mods then the ability to make that judgment if I am actually a spam poster everywhere. They should have the ability to just ban me. But that's another, I think, key aspect we've been hearing is spam. Um, yeah, so I think that's the main one.
So I think something being in Web3 or being Web3 native, something that keeps coming up is this concept of decentralization. And when we talk about having channel entrepreneurs be kind of the arbiter of content that, I think it leads channels in a very specific way, and not necessarily a bad way, right? But the vision might be very different. And you guys also have a separate view where you could instead of sorting through certain metrics like maybe community engagement, like that is a more relevant metric to me, and that is something that you might be able to utilize on Cura. But I'm curious to hear about maybe more just on a philosophical level how you guys are thinking about channels, because I think sometimes, as a channel owner, maybe I mean, it's a natural instincts, but like, oh, you have an idea of how you want a channel to go, but what you really want to decentralize is the work, right? You want to find some consensus in, maybe among your other moderators, among your active channel users on like, oh, this is kind of where we see the conversation going in our little cozy corner. But then, it's like, well, but I also want to kind of let people take ownership and contribute in managing this space that is ours. And so there's like a centralized vision but decentralized workload. How do you feel about that as you think through activating more features for channels?
That is such a good question, right? I think because we think about that all the time, right? You can actually just compare Cura to, say, Reddit for a community, right? And Reddit has kept everything centralized. Uh, m- Mods have never been given the due for all the hard work that they put in, and neither have their communities. Everyone's just endlessly pouring their love and passion in there. So I think making it decentralized is a big part of it, and allowing the community and mod to feel full ownership of what they're building. I love this idea. I think we discussed it with Humpty and a few others. Was we don't in our last call was we don't want a community to feel like they're tied into one app. Channel owners and entrepreneurs should be able to take their community wherever the community is, and if that's on X, on YouTube, on Farcaster, Coinbase, World, everywhere with them, and have their own landing page and own their own community, and it should be able to be discoverable in this ecosystem on all of these platforms. I think that's what, going back to Dan's point I was referring to before, was um, Cura can hold and give all those tools and power to mods, and we'll keep iterating on that, right? I know the more we talk to channel owners and entrepreneurs, they have other visions and ideas, but essentially we want them to own their community and take it wherever it is. I know for Humpty, sometimes it is not just Farcaster, because he's also bringing other like-minded people on Farcaster and onboarding them. So some of his community members and creators might actually be on X or YouTube, and bringing them is so important. So that's what I think truly decentralizing it would be for channels. Humpty, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that's the sense that I usually get for Crypto Sapiens.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about having different touch points, right? So Farcaster isn't the do all end all. It was interesting to hear from people today that they were very focused on Farcaster, and while they have touch points outside of it, I think it's a growing, kind of something that you mature and you grow and you learn that you can't just rely on one distribution channel, right? I'm not talking about channels, just like Farcaster overall. So one thing that I learned a while ago is that in order to engage and just be of service to the community that I serve, I need to be where they are. And if that is Twitter, so be it. If that is Instagram, so be it. If that is Discord, a newsletter, like there's so many different ways of like engaging your community and adding value to their own experience and why they follow you and why they subscribe. So, yes, in our conversations, we talked about like Farcaster for me being the most crypto native way to talk about on chain media, which is my focus, right? And so I want to be able to bring people together and have that conversation on Farcaster. And that was the reason why the Crypto Sapiens channel was born. Now, do I want people to come onto the Farcaster app to do that? Not necessarily. Like, if I can have an app experience that I can connect to my website, which is like app.cryptosapiens.xyz, that would be the best way to do it. Because the fact of the matter is, I usually funnel people to my site either to read the newsletter or collect an NFT, or there's a lot of different activities or actions they can take on the website. If they can start communing with one another on the website through an app, aka mini app that works on Farcaster too, that would be more ideal. And that's why Cura was very exciting for me from the very beginning, was because I can bring people onto Farcaster and a crypto native way of like communicating with one another through these identities that live on chain, and really not having the friction of the sign up on Farcaster, but just doing it where they are. If they're already on my website, so be it. So yeah, I mean, I think that that's a good point. And certainly I think that there's different needs, but I mean that's my personal need and want.
Yeah, I mean, Rez, also just like I love that Humpty said that, and just to add to that, to kind of like wrap it up in a philosophical way, I would say, um, what we want is that the goal should be whatever your version of community ownership looks like, right? Cura should be the infrastructure that supports it, um, and not necessarily overrides it with their own opinion. So that's probably the way I would put it philosophically.
I love that. Dan this morning also talked about, like just giving channels or no, giving enabling opportunities on the protocol for clients to innovate on it how in any way they wish, right? Like that, I think that's at the very core, that's what Farcaster is, right? To me, when people ask me what Farcaster is, it's okay, there's a protocol, there's information that lives on there, and it's up to people if they want to build an app, however they want to organize this information, that makes a client, right? And then I think, to kind of to go out a level, once you're on Cura, well, there's still so much room, so many different opinions. And then, the nature of the information, there's so many ways, even still, now that you have this tool that the people who are curating can lean into and imagine their space however they want to. And I think, Kira being very proactive and thinking through that and not choosing to be opinionated about one I guess mode or another. I think that really resonates with me. It inspires me.
Yeah, and we actually want to meet the users where they are, and that's why we also have the Cura as a mini app, right, on Farcaster for anyone who doesn't want another app or is not sure how that experience is going to be. They can feel that experience on Farcaster, to know what it is and what value it brings to them, as a community member or a channel moderator or an entrepreneur.
Can you tell us a little bit where Cura is going? Maybe some upcoming interesting updates or things that you guys are really thinking about right now or debating on even?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that we have on the roadmap. The two things that I'm really excited about, that I would actually talk more, is one is the new user discoverability. I think, in my conversation with so many of these channel owners has been able to discover new users that are in your channel. It's really hard because there are all these people trying to cast new channel. They might not be a member, they might not know how to be a member, and they kind of never surface or get lost in the noise. So I think giving channel mods that power to discover new users without having to face or deal with spam is something that's on our roadmap, and I'm really excited about. Um, Something we're debating, or not debating, but kind of figuring out is with token communities. Tokens are a huge part of Web3 and crypto, right? So we actually have a token feed that's still in a beta testing phase, but we have a token feed where you can actually see what true token holders and genuine token holders are talking about. It doesn't have to be about the token necessarily, but just what are they engaging with, what are they casting about, and then also you can see what are they talking about the token. So I think that's really powerful, but I think we're still in the figuring out stage of testing it with token communities to see what value it brings. That's exciting. I don't know if I was allowed to say that, but I said it anyway, so it's done.
That's why we're here. Literally,
You
the
heard it
banner
here
we
first.
the banner we created was like alpha drops right on Farcaster. So you literally just did an alpha drop. Love it. Sahil, thank you for sending Anshal. Uh, you're like the who's the Spider-Man now? The Tom Holland of the Marvel universe who's dropping all the secrets of the MCU
I hope
without.
this is not my first and last podcast then.
No, no. You know, I love that you're here, actually. So you
Yeah.
said at the very beginning, oh, sorry you couldn't get to heal. I love having people who have never kind of been exposed on the media in this way because, A, Kira Open Rank is not just Sahil. Sure, he might be the founder, right? And the guy that's like leading a lot of these ideas and concepts and the team. But it is through the nuance of perspective from the people who are there that really make it what it is. And so I love that you're the one here and not Sahil. I get to hear Sahil a lot.
Thank you.
And people don't really get to hear your voice. And I feel like people should hear your voice. And regardless of how many secrets you share with us.
I appreciate that, Humpty. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've reached the end of the stream. Even like X kicked us out, by the way. So we are only live on YouTube now because X has like very strict rules about when you can start, when you can finish. But thankfully, YouTube has allowed the stream to continue. And if for anybody who missed it, I'm going to be posting this on our podcast. So on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you'll be able to rediscover this again. Anshal, you've been a superstar. Thank you so much. Honestly,
Thank you so
you've
much for
given
having
us a
me,
lot
you
of
guys.
insights.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Happy
Cool.
Friday.
Thank you.
Friday to you.
Happy Friday. Bye.
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 All right, Rez, just you and me.
Yeah,
What do you
Humpty,
think?
that was great. It's so exciting, old friends, new friends, just, hearing about where things are going. This has been a really great stream. And actually my first time hosting a podcast, so thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, I want to recognize you for having really lifted this. A lot of everyone who showed up today, with maybe the exception of one or two people, it was you reaching out and just sharing with them the event. The concept of this event was born out of a coffee and croissant in Venice when we met up for the first time. So I think it's so cool that even after only one meeting, we decided, oh my God, we're going to be really great collaborators. And we made this happen. And channels have never looked better, in my opinion. The
Yes.
conversations were great.
Yes, and Humpty, this wouldn't have happened without you and your diligence and tenacity. So thank you so much for making sure that this happens. This stream was your idea, and I'm really so glad that we did this. Got some good feedback, and we've managed to go 3 hours without telling our audience how they can participate.
That's
Um,
true. That was horrible on our part. Go for it. Let
um,
people know what they can do.
So today, obviously, this stream is the kickoff party for official Channels Day, OCD, which officially happens tomorrow on June 7th, Saturday. So if you are a channel moderator, channel owner, if you're an individual user and there are channels that you would like to recognize, there is a visual that you could find on Farcaster, and I'm sure if you follow Humpty, it will be right there. But feel free to recast that picture and recognize the top channels that you like. It can be one, it can be a big long list, anything that you think Humpty and I should see and that we might not know about yet. This is the opportunity. And in terms of channel active channel users, we'd love for you to also recognize some other fellow users who have been active and contributing and really, consistently providing content that you guys appreciate, so that they know that this is time to make more of it. We're here for it.
Awesome. Well, Rez, it's been great. We'll see you.
Yes.
We'll see you on chain, as I like to say.
Yes. Happy Friday, Humpty. See you on chain.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.